Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you all to What South Jersey Needs to Thrive, ensuring federal infrastructure and Green New Deal legislation reaches frontline communities. My name is Neil Maher. I'm a history professor at the New Jersey Institute of Technology and Rutgers University in Newark, where I teach environmental history, political history, and the history of environmental inequality and justice in the United States. Before we begin, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement and a blessing from Chief Vincent Mann of the Turtle Clan of Ramapough Lenape Nation. And also we'd like to encourage people to find out what land they are currently on. And you can do that through a website, which I will include in the chat as Chief Mann is talking. So I think, yeah, there we are.
Kiha Kolomosi, Ninju Sinzi, Kikai Man, Nunjiai, Lamawo, Wanjikil, Lamawo, Takwa, Wak Lamawo, Sipu, Anishi Kishalo Mokweng, Elamiliang Yonkwai Kishkweek, Wak Kukana Aki, Wak Tinda, Wak Mbi, Wak Yilongo Mati, Wak Nimbu Mausawakanum. Anishik, 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 Anishik. How's everybody doing? My name is Chief Mann. I'm the Turtle Clan Chief of the Ramapough Lenape Nation. Thank you, Creator, for giving us this day, our Mother Earth, the fire and the water. We thank you for all of our relations, and most importantly, we thank you for our lives. And then I thank the four directions. As you all come together today, it's very important to remember the lands in which we all dwell upon. For us, it is our ancestors, and that is the Munsee speaking people and the Wenami speaking people from South Jersey. Today is very important. It's my hope that there will be coming together of some great minds as we work towards a better day and a better future, not just for ourselves, but also for our children and the next 7 generations. I myself am sitting in front of Representative Josh Gottheimer's Glen Rock office, where at a half an hour, 27 minutes, we will begin to speak about how our representatives need to speak for the people and not for corporations, not for other people who they seemingly represent other than ourselves. So with that, again, I just want to thank you all and let you know that I'm grateful for being asked to offer those words today. Anishik, thank you.
Thank you, Chief Vincent Mann of the Turtle Clan Ramapough Lenape Nation, of the Munsee Lenape peoples who have been on these lands north of the Raritan River, northern New Jersey, western Pennsylvania, lower New York State, and southern Connecticut for millennia. The ceremonial stone landscapes, which include stone turtles, fish weirs, the many, many paths that circulate throughout this larger region, and the newly made Three Sisters Garden that Chief Mann and Clan Mother Michaeline Picaro have created, are testaments to the false stories that Dutch and British colonists told themselves to justify their claims and occupations of these lands, and then the same claims that were then assumed by the new American nation and George Washington, who was, with his family, surveyors of these very same lands. And we all know enslavement in the region also followed with that change of occupation. The question of the indigenous common lands to be shared with respect and humility is at the heart of this working session today, and the reason why the Price Institute at Rutgers University at Newark is committed to collaborating with New Jersey Thrives and so many locally based organizations protecting the waters and lands of our once far more biodiverse region. the beautiful New Jersey Green New Deal initiative emerging from the eco-justice and environmental justice initiatives of community-based organizations is fundamental to the protection of the state of New Jersey and beyond, the commons, the common water, the common air, the common land we all depend on and share. New Jersey residents of the present and past have benefited from the grassroots movements that pushed for the New Deal of the 1930s. We today still enjoy the legacy of the civilian public works, of the parks, of the building infrastructures of bridges, housing, and the public culture that now this 80-plus-year-old set of policies and legislation created. But of course, 80 years since, there's a great need for repair and renewal. And we also need to be more inclusive of all those who are left off of the FDR New Deal. And we need to be pushing what President Roosevelt had echoed of those grassroots groups in pushing for what he called the 4 freedoms: the freedom of speech, the freedom of worship, the freedom from want, which includes, of course, housing, energy, and all the things we depend on for everyday life, and the freedom from fear. So we're really pushing in that tradition and the need to reinvigorate that tradition. We need to learn from the wrongs of the past and build better and stronger with more justice. We at the Price Institute want to acknowledge the lead community-based organization leadership that have initiated this today, but also who have pushed for these issues in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jack, and also thank you, Chief Mann, for those wonderful words. I also want to thank some others for participating in this event. First of all of you. You have taken time out of really busy summer schedules, some of you taking time out of your vacation. We have more than a dozen community representatives, nearly as many academics, and it's all of you that are really making this conversation possible, so thank you. I also want to thank our co-conveners, Rutgers University's Price Institute, for hosting and funding the event, the Ramapough Culture and Land Foundation, and also NJ Thrives, which actually had the idea for creating a second event on Southern New Jersey. And the organization provided me with the following description of this organization, and I wanted to read it because I think it's really important and sets the tone for what we're trying to do today. NJ Thrives brings together the experts, people from our communities, to chart a path forward in which they finally have a say. For too long, well-intentioned groups and politically connected corporations have decided what is best for our communities. It is our time to lead the way and build a future for New Jersey where all of us matter. It's a future to heal our lands from a toxic past and restore our communities, where we are ready for flooding and storms, where our kids can count on good jobs, where we protect our air and water for generations. It's a future where we can all thrive. And I just want to mention, when I use the word we and our, I'm using your words, not my own as an academic. So I respect that you all are part of that community, and I understand that I'm not. Also, I want to thank a few individuals who made this event possible at the Price Institute: Jack, Tchen, Alexandra Chang, Scott Bernstein, Rosamond King, Marion Mien, Crystal Robinson, Amanjana Goswami, and Colleen O'Neill, and then the team at NJ Thrives: Maria Lopez Nunez, Chief Mann, Sue Altman, Kim Gaddy, Melissa Miles, James Williams, and especially Amanda Devicker-Rainier. Two very, very special thanks to two people who, without them, this would not have happened. Jody Stewart from the New Jersey Resource Project and Claudia Sepulveda from the Price Institute. I cannot emphasize more that this event would not take place without those two people. They have organized and guided us and kept us on track throughout the past month when we were pulling this all together. Just a very brief overview of the afternoon's events. We'll have 3 sessions. This event is the second of 3 events in which we're trying to bring together local communities, members, and university academics who are interested in collaborating with local communities. And the goal is to ensure that federal infrastructure and Green New Deal legislation reaches frontline communities in New Jersey. The first of these events was held back in June with a focus on northern New Jersey. We have members from the Highlands community in the north of the state and also the Newark area. The second event today will focus on southern New Jersey. And then our third event in late October will bring politicians into this conversation, local, state, and regional politicians. And we'll use that event to try to put some pressure on them, political pressure, to ensure that federal money gets distributed equitably during the upcoming legislative initiatives. Today's event, as its title indicates, is a discussion. There are no formal presentations. Rather, it's a conversation led by local community members who are in dialogue with university academics, trusted academics who are interested in this work. The focus of the conversation is around three issues: energy, housing, and infrastructure. Those three issues arose from community members from NJ Thrive who felt that they were the most important for their work. And the idea is to look at how those issues are related to Biden's infrastructure legislation and any Green New Deal legislation that comes in the future, and to ensure that these issues are dealt with and that the legislation benefits frontline communities in New Jersey. The format of the event is a little bit unique. We have three panels that are each 1 hour long. Each panel has a moderator. The first panel will be on energy. The second panel on housing. In both of those panels, we have 4 community members each and 4 university academics each who will be discussing those issues. The timing of each panel is that the first 20 minutes will be devoted to community members to discuss their issues and their concerns. The second 20 minutes will allow academics to join in those conversations in any way that they can to support such efforts. And then the last 15 minutes, we will bring in panelists from the other session to have a larger conversation about the issues of energy and housing. The goal is not only to foster collaboration between local community members and academics, but also to forge synergies for those working on energy, housing, and infrastructure, in this case, in southern New Jersey. Our last panel of the day will be on infrastructure, and we'll bring together everybody, all the panelists from the other 2 sessions, to brainstorm what we're calling next steps to ensure that this federal money reaches frontline communities. Between sessions, we have very, very brief interludes. I don't want to call them breaks because they're really quite interesting and exciting. We've organized these interludes with artists, a poet and 2 visual artists who will present some of their work. And their work is related to what we're discussing. It's work about social and environmental justice issues. And all of these artists are from New Jersey. So that'll be a nice way to transition between the sessions. So now I want to jump right into our first session on energy in southern New Jersey. I'm going to introduce our moderator for that panel, Maria Lopez Nunez. I'm sure all of you know Maria. She's Director of Environmental Justice and Community Development at the Ironbound Community Corporation and was also recently named one of 18 members of President Biden's White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And she's also a key player with NJ Thrive. So thank you, Maria, for being here, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to give our panelists, especially our community panelists, give you some time to start, look in the mirror and up your cameras. So, we're here to discuss, as our wonderful colleagues over at Rutgers have said, energy, right? Like the whole, what is the purpose of energy? And then more importantly, how is energy generated and what say does our community have in that process? So on my panel, I'm going to call y'all, get a little familiar. I've heard a lot about you and some of you have met, but I'll call you by your first names so you can start introducing yourselves, right? We have Marcus, Chuck, Pat, and Sharon on this panel. So if you can go one by one and just share a little bit. So maybe in your introduction, share like your name, your affiliations, but what does energy mean to you? You know, I think I'll start you off with that first question to introduce yourself. So Marcus, why don't we start with you? We'll go Chuck, Pat, and then Sharon.
Thank you so much, Maria. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcus Sibley. I am the chairman of the New Jersey State Conference NACP Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. Also serve as the chairman of the New Jersey Progressive Equitable Energy Coalition, and also the president of the Southern Burlington County NACP chapter. And energy is important because we represent traditionally overburdened communities. And the more energy we can create, the more we can start relying on fossil fuels, the less futures that are impacted, because these facilities are usually in Black and brown neighborhoods. So we have a very much tremendous vested interest in energy and renewable sources of energy, but more importantly, making sure everyone stays honest, because even in the renewable world, we're also seeing that there are a lot of racism exists. And we need to make sure that all the companies that come in and swoop up the money, remember that you can't help people by exploiting people in the process. So the NACP takes a very firm stance with that. And we're very grateful for being on this panel. So thank you.
Chuck, you can go next. And also, I've been informed we do have another pan. Oh, no, please disregard. You know how it is, tech issues. Chuck?
Hi, I'm Chuck Griffin. I'm a 74-year-old retired nurse. My wife and I have lived in the Little Lake Harbor for 40 years, and we had substantial damage done to our home during Superstorm Sandy. I've been a member of New Jersey Organizing Project since 2011. We organized to help Sandy victims get back into their homes, and we continue towards that goal. Not everybody's back yet. I think you're going to hear from Beth today, and she's still working on getting back in our home. And the purpose of what we're going to talk about today is global warming, greenhouse gases. The temperature of the globe has gone up by 1 degree in the last approximately 100 years, and we can't afford to keep up that trend. So we're going to talk a lot about how we stop global warming, what we can do to stop it.
I don't see you, but are you still with us?
Pat
Sure.
was just kicked off. She'll be back on.
Okay, so we'll go to Sharon and we'll come back to Pat.
There we go.
Yeah, perfect.
My
You got it.
name's Sharon Quilter. Oh, yeah, Pat's back. You want to go back to her, or you want me to? I don't want to ruin your flow. All right. So anyway, my name's Sharon Quilter, and I was propelled to New Jersey Organizing Project because of Superstorm Sandy. I live in Wortley Beach, which, if anyone remembers, was called Ground Zero. I learned that Ground Zero is probably not the place you want to live during a storm like Sandy. And initially, there was a lot of confusion about our response, but most of us were propelled to help each other. There was a tremendous amount of empathy that we all, especially in NJIT, demonstrated to our neighbors. That opened a path for me. It drove me to NJIT, and I'm also running for state assembly now on the information and the passion that I feel because of all this. How did it happen? It's interesting that 13% of the damage done in Superstorm Sandy, which equates to $8.7 billion in damage, was due to climate change. That's a pretty significant number. 13% of the storm damage was done by climate change. So we need to mitigate the past damage and offset damage from natural disasters in the future. And this has to become a primary objective now. First, we need to start with taxpayer relief, and that begins with cost sharing, not just among other taxpayers like us. It's also responsible. Fossil fuel companies have to pony up and help us out. They must be held financially accountable. They're accountable for life and property damage that their lack of transparency created. They must now be made to support mitigation efforts we are currently financing, not just from past damage, but to stave off damage from future disaster events as well. Clean energy initiatives are a good beginning. As a coastal resident, I look to offshore wind as the leader in a triad of solutions we may employ. We can't rely solely on one solution. We learned the hard way with fossil fuel energy, didn't we? We must insist on alternative clean energy sources as well. Solar and geothermal energy are options which come to mind. My biggest concern, and that gleans from the past events, is the inclusion of the stakeholders in decision-making for clean energy. Investigation and inception of all clean energy resources must include public input and the intake of viable solutions offered by we who live with the legislative decisions others make for us. After all, we elected them, and we elected them to promote our best interests. Officials can no longer assume they know what's best for us. I dislike in us versus them mentality. However, our needs and concerns must become paramount in decision-making in the legislative process. Clean energy, offshore wind in particular, must include us as stakeholders in all decisions which affect our lives.
Thank you. And Pat, I don't know if you heard us, but just introduce yourself, your affiliation, and just what does energy mean to you?
Maria, I'm not sure she's back on.
Thank you, Jody. I got a lot of heads up here, which is great. I love seeing the audience and seeing your names to know you're here. So we'll just get started. And Jody, if you can give me a heads up when Pat gets in. I love the intimacy. So I think, you know, I loved your introductions, and I want to remind the audience that energy generation, right now currently happens through nuclear, right? Power plants, natural gas, which is fracked gas that is then pumped to power plants. We also burn coal, or we burn biomass, which sounds different than coal, but it's more like burning trees, you know? So I want to demystify that of like, what is our current makeup? And then in terms of renewables, in our state, we have solar, we have wind, and we do have, unfortunately, other things that are considered renewable still in New Jersey that some of us, like Marcus and I, are fighting to get rid of, which include incineration, biomass, hydro, you know, some things that also damage our ecosystem. You know, a lot of folks take energy for granted. When they turn on the lights, they don't imagine where it comes from. So everyone wants everything electrified, but we know that electricity has to come from somewhere, and that's what we're here to discuss. Pat is back. So Pat, if you can introduce yourself, and then I just want to start thinking about, yeah, I'll let Pat introduce themselves first.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. I don't know, everything went haywire and it just died. So hopefully it'll stay good this time. My name's Pat Trotter. I live on Long Beach Island. I've been a permanent resident here for 5 years, but this is my childhood home. So basically for the last 68 years, I have also been in this house and on this island. So I've seen a lot of changes. I also, many years ago, when was during the Clinton administration, I had a FEMA project in Kentucky, which was hazard mitigation. They were doing a thing called Project Impact at the time, and I was in charge of Project Impact for the state of Kentucky. So my issues with, you know, mitigation and trying to make things better for flooding and all that kind of stuff kind of go back to that. But I'm a photographer. That's the main thing I'm doing now. But like I said, my background is in disaster mitigation, education, and thoroughbred horse racing. So figure that one out.
Thank you. So I'll start off by asking the panelists, what your favorite type of energy is, and I know that we have a definite bias in the audience, in our panel. So I'm excited to hear that. What's your favorite type of energy, like energy generation? What do you imagine should be the energy landscape in New Jersey? And then getting into specifically why you think your community would benefit the most from the one that you chose. So I'll start with Sharon, and then we can go to Marcus.
Okay, I'm coastal, so my heart goes to wind turbines and ocean turbines, because I think that not only is it a terrific way to get energy and a lot of it, it's also really will help our economy. It's going to provide jobs that last forever. They're not gig work. It's going to be jobs that people can support their families with. And then the ancillary jobs also, the guy that works the deli, or all those, I would say dry cleaning, but I don't think people that are going to work in wind turbines have to worry about dry cleaning. But that's what it'll also improve. It will give us a very, very good way of saying, look, we need that infrastructure money to improve our roads. We need that. We need to be able to evacuate people if there are future storms. I'm not sure that we have that ability right now. So by putting us in the energy creation web, I think that will help us make sure that we get the infrastructural improvements we need as well.
Okay, so this is a toughie. This is a toughie for me because I like solar and I like offshore wind. And I like offshore wind for what it could mean. Offshore wind, as Sharon was speaking about, that brings in a whole new sector of jobs. And we're very much interested in jobs. We say jobs all day long. Jobs change communities. Jobs change lives. Jobs build self-esteem. So when you have quality jobs in a community, then that community has the opportunity to thrive. So something like offshore wind, where we're seeing so much interest, that's an opportunity. That's a tremendous opportunity for us to reach out to these different agencies and organizations and have everyone promote job training and job placement for the people who've been traditionally overlooked and overburdened. So that's why I like offshore wind. The flip side, I also like solar. I like solar a lot. And I also like it because we try our best to try to get the companies in our state to be stewards and to be to help us in this fight. So what we're doing at NACP right now, we're trying to reach out to different companies to say, you have these huge factories. Why would you not outline your factory with solar panels? We can have a tremendous opportunity to provide energy for our communities with these factories that are in our communities. So as we have a combination of electrifying our fleets and then putting solar panels along these different buildings, then that's going to be a lot of, so there's an increase of energy and a reduction of the pollution, air pollution. So I would say I'm kind of at a tie between solar and offshore wind. If I can cheat, if you allow me to cheat, I'll have to say a combination of the two, Maria.
Of course. And next, go to Chuck and then Pat.
Hi, the one thing that I want to add to what Marcus said is that the solar and wind are both real clean as far as greenhouse gases go. So they both seem to be the way, it both seems to be the way of energy of the future. But the one thing that we have to keep in mind with both of these is that the building of these items, the building of the solar panels and the building of the turbines, both have quite a carbon footprint. I was reading recently that most of the solar panels are made in China, and solar panel construction has a very large carbon footprint. Of course, once everything is in, then it's very clean. But both of these are not without their own carbon problem.
Hey, Pat, we'd love to hear from you.
I'm trying to get in on my iPad as well because it keeps telling me that I'm going in and out here. So we'll see if that works. I pretty much support solar and wind. Part of what I've been working on with NJOP over the last couple of years is the whole wind issue, and just, you know, kind of studying it. And it's really a good alternative for the shore communities to have the offshore wind. But we need to make sure that, you know, that the developers are just taking everybody's comments and working with them, as opposed to going willy-nilly and just doing what they want. You know, make sure that when they talk about jobs, that they have some kind of guarantee for us that those jobs really are going to materialize, and how are they going to be here, and how, you know, there've been stuff written, but where's the beef? So I'd like to see the developers being held more to account. I think we all want to see them do that. But that goes for BOEM too. So it's like, you know, it's like kind of back and forth. And also that it's done safely. I think that's another issue that we're looking at, and safely on all fronts from all kinds of people. So there's going to be different people traversing those wind farms, and all the like fishing and cargo ships, and we know whatever's going to be traversing that area, we need to make sure they're safe for those people as well. So I think there's issues, but I think overall wind is one of our best bets. It can generate an awful lot of power. And of course, on the island, we have the quote view shedders who are raising holy hell because they don't want to see them. Big deal. I'm sorry. You know? And I think we all realize that. I think one of the things we've talked about with our group is, you know, just let's make sure that if there's to look at, but it seemed to be going that route. Yes, I see a lot of positives for wind. Big issues.
I think we're all just waiting for Maria. She might have some connectivity issues.
Yes, thank you. Similar to Pat. Hi, it's not just you. The world is a little hazy with the internet. That's why I keep turning my phone off. So I apologize for that. Thank you all so much for sharing. And I guess my last question before we bring on the academics is just what will it look like for communities to be involved in this process? You know, I think you've all laid out beautiful, like why it's important to us, but like, what does engagement look like? And what do you want to see that? How do you want to see that happen from the state, from the energy companies themselves? You know, what will it look like for communities to be involved when it comes to the site, jobs, benefits, you know, all that sorts of things. How do you want us to help make decisions? And Chuck, maybe we can start with you.
Okay. An interesting fact that I'm staring at here is that worldwide, each one of us produces about 4 tons of carbon per year. Now, again, that's not just coming out of your tailpipe and off the barbecue grill. We produce carbon waste when a factory builds our TV set, or or car or whatever. So on the average worldwide, we produce 4 tons of carbon per year. In the US, we produce 16 tons of carbon per year. And if we want to drop our carbon footprint to where the polar ice caps stops melting, and we stop the ozone layer problem and global warming, we need to bring our carbon footprint down to 2 tons per person per year. That's a lot. That's a lot. So it's not something that we can sit by and hope that this takes place. Every single one of us has to work on this to get our carbon footprint down. That's why it's so important that we talk about cars that run on a little electric, and factories that produce cleaner, and buses and trucks and whatever. It's a big deal.
Community-wise, I think part of it is the community can participate if they're educated. And that's something I think, that's one of the things we're trying to do with NJOP is create a presentation that we can take to the different groups that give them a balanced view, especially of the wind issue, because that's our issue here. We have too many people who they spout off, but they haven't done their homework. And the community needs to be involved, but the community, quote, people in the community also need to do their homework. So when they are making comments, their comments are based on fact and not on emotion. And I think that's on this island, that's a tough sell, because it's the wind issue on the shore is very political, unfortunately, but it is. We've got a lot of Stop the Steal folks that live on this island, and they are anti-wind, but they're anti-wind because of the administration that's pushing wind, not necessarily because they're anti-wind. So we're fighting that as well. And that's a community issue that I think the only way we can get around is by putting out the good news, putting out the correct information, getting the dialogue, letting people say, this is what bothers me, and then explaining, well, and this is how it's being addressed, because a lot of the issues are being addressed. They're being addressed by different groups, but they're being addressed. I read an article, just as an aside, which I thought was kind of cool. People have talked about how wind stops working sometimes. And well, actually Shell is in collaboration with some other company. They have designed a floating solar grid that wraps around a turbine that takes over if the turbine doesn't have wind or can't work or whatever. So, I mean, they're working, there's an issue, they're already working on it. So I think we need to, there's cycling the turbines, what happens to them after they're decommissioned. So that's another issue. We need to let people know, no, there's a way to do this. This is happening and people are doing it the right way. So I think community, yes, has to be involved, but I think it's our job to educate them so that they have the right information, and then they can then if they still don't like it, okay, but they're not liking it because it's based on fact and it's based on information.
Okay, thank you so much, Pat. And I'll just jump in here because I echo everything you're saying. Education is very much important. And it's also important to have your community members educated, so when they do have an opportunity to participate, when there's community input, they're educated. They're able to communicate effectively. To that end, the NAACP, we submitted some suggestions to the DEP for the new cumulative impacts rulemaking. And one of the suggestions was that when polluting facilities are when they're applying for a permit, that when we have the community sessions, that they are providing experts or the opportunity for the community to have an expert, because it's not balanced ever when we're meeting with billion-dollar companies who have million-dollar attorneys and also million-dollar experts. So just meeting with us isn't enough. You have to make sure we're equipped when we're meeting. So we're hoping that the DEP takes that seriously. The other part when it comes to energy and how do you get our communities involved? To me, the number one thing we have to understand is that not every community, this is the number one priority. And to understand, like if your community is dealing with police brutality, not being able to drive down the street without being harassed, people look like you getting murdered, housing issues, not only environmental, but housing issues because the color of your skin, they don't take care of the property, and that's leading to the issues. So when you have communities who have other things on their plate, we could have a whole lot more people fighting in this field if everyone would just understand that there's other fights that you can lend your voices, lend your leverage, lend your power to. If everyone who was in the EJ fight came over to social justice sometime, then we can get a lot more people in the EJ fight. But that's what people have to understand. Why aren't there more Black people? Why aren't there more Latinx? Because we have other fights. So if everyone comes over and help us, then we can get a whole army in the EJ fight. And then we can have real community input. Because as much as I like the fact that we have community representation, we don't have enough community representation. And that won't happen until we have more people representing our communities. Because we have no shortage of calling out our communities when it's time to get a grant. There's no shortage of talking about Black and brown. But when it comes to what's happening to the Black and brown, we have a real shortage of other people coming to that microphone and saying, this is dead wrong. We're not going to elect you until you do things to stop this. So for us, social justice and environmental justice are like this. They're intertwined. So we need more people to get involved so we can get more people to this fight.
Thank you. And in that very important spirit that you're talking about interdependence, I want to ask my academics if you could turn your cameras off. And Sharon, I definitely want to hear from you. And Chuck, I saw you raise your hand, so I know you have something to say. But I want to start bringing on. So if you could just start turning your cameras on, so I know that you're here. And if the tech folks can spotlight them for me too, that'd be great. And Sharon, let's give you the floor.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to, Pat, I want to say one thing about the people that say that the view is obstructed from wind turbines. Would they rather have 50 banner planes fly over their head every day that they're sitting on the beach? Come on, it doesn't even make any sense. As far as community outreach, I'm running for assembly. I feel so strongly about us getting in there and getting stakeholders at that table to make sure things, to Marcus's point, everybody's included. Every thought is taken into account. And the plan on how to fix things is ours. It's our plan, it's what we do. So community outreach is key, educating people. Pat and I are also certified coast stewards, and we got that certification through Rutgers. What does that do? That gives us that information to tell people what happens around wind turbines, that it's good for the environment, that it creates its own reef effect, that's a non-issue. So to Pat's point, gathering information, disseminating the information, and that's something we can do through NJOP very often, and we will continue to do that. And hopefully I'll be doing it from Trenton too. So yeah, thank you.
Well, and part of the issue I have living on Long Beach Island is we have become where if you're middle or low income, you can't afford to live here anymore. That was not the case when my parents bought this house years ago. But I'll just give you an example of how things have changed. One street over from me, within the last year, there have been 5 new houses. 4 of them have been tear downs. The new houses going up have been 3 times the size of the house that was there before. So think of the carbon footprint. These are people that don't vote here. These are not permanent people. So though I don't know how we reach that population, but they're paying a lot of taxes on this island and they're, building. So that's a community voice, but how do we educate them and how do we get it? Because they don't live here, they don't seem to care once they go home. And these are really expensive houses, which is why, Sharon, I don't think the view is going to bother them. If somebody just built a $3 million house, if there's a toothpick on the horizon, they're not going to stop coming down to their $3 million house. So I'm really not concerned about the view people, but I'm concerned about who has the political power. And if you're not registered to vote in Ocean County or on LBI, then how do you make the decisions for what's here?
Thank you. All right. So if our new guests, if you all would kindly introduce yourself. I see Kevin, Joe, Clint, and Scott.
Hello, I'll go first since you said my name. Kevin Lyons, Rutgers Business School. And when we discuss what we can discuss, I can speak to the offshore wind issues as well as the workforce and diversity and inclusion that's around that.
I can go. Clint Andrews. I'm a professor at the School of Planning and Public Policy at Rutgers, and I can maybe contribute a little bit about how the community role relates to the private enterprise role in the energy space, because it is private money, and the key is the word veto power.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joe. I'm in the Center for Ocean Observing Leadership at Rutgers University, and my background. So I'm a physical oceanographer and meteorologist. So I'm very heavy on the physical environment side of things. But I also have gotten more and more involved as I've been now back at Rutgers. I grew up in New Jersey in Monmouth County. So New Jersey has been my home for forever. Even when I left. Since I've been back, I've started getting a lot more involved in a lot of the other questions, like the community-based questions, concerns of the fishing industry, and so on and so forth. And so I'm just very happy to try to help contribute however I can to this important conversation.
Hi, I'm Scott Bernstein. I serve as an advisor to the Price Institute. I'm also the founder of the Center for Neighborhood Technology, which for over 40 years has helped communities around the country figure out how to use energy more wisely, productively, and with more value capture for residents who need it. And I also serve as president of the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, the nation's largest such group, and I'm prepared to discuss how emerging policy and appropriations might be thought about in terms of benefiting New Jersey communities directly. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Oh, and thank you for joining us. So this question could be answered by anybody, right? It's not just now we see it all the time to the academics. So, and I appreciate y'all joining. This is important for us to figure out. We have tension all sorts of places with communities, because unfortunately in this country, we haven't been community censored, right? And community led for quite some time. Oftentimes, like Marcus has said a lot, right? Other folks are making decisions for us without the lived experience. You know, I've heard that a lot today from you folks in the shore, right? Like how decisions are sometimes not led by facts or by people's lived experience, right? They're often political decisions or decisions coming externally. So I think it's important for us to always ground ourselves in community. So with that in mind, I would love to hear from our newer guests, like reactions you had to what folks said. And then one thing that's really coming to my mind is just that it sounds like there are a lot of misconceptions about wind out there, you know? So it sounds like some of y'all have great experience on that. Like, what are some of the myths about wind that you would love to just bust up? And I'm recognizing that I late for the next panel. So if everybody could just keep it short and let's keep the flow going. I won't keep it. I'll let us have more of a conversation.
Well, I'll do something real fast. one thing is access to information, good quality information. Now, when I was brought into this project, wind project, I'll just speak to that real fast. I was asked, what are the opportunities for jobs and as well as workforce connected to that as it directly impacts the communities that would benefit from that. So I was contracted to do what's called a purchasing disparity study, which was to look at who are the available women-owned, minority-owned firms in New Jersey that could partake in this emerging industry. And that report was delivered back to NJIT, and that information is available to the community. I think it's important that those types of studies and reports get into the hands of the community so they understand what their opportunities are. So that I think that's what we really need to do, is we need to stop talking up here and then bring it down into the community so they can use that. And I hate to use this word, but weaponize it and actually use it to get ahead rather than always coming from behind.
I'll go. I think that there's been a bias against place-based strategies in the United States for a very long time. It started to change slowly in the last 20, 25 years. There are funds that come to New Jersey, generated within New Jersey, that can be spent in the name of community-based, both empowerment and development, that are incompletely spent for those purposes. Let's just put it that way. And so I think part of what the education is that several speakers wisely spoke to earlier, part of the engagement has to be understanding the difference between one-way communication and getting informed versus two-way communication and actually designing a better future that actually works for people in communities. On the wind issue, I think we should reflect on something that I heard Chuck Griffin say. If we're using many times the amount of energy that we could be using, and we try and size these newer technologies, solar, wind, or what have you, to meet that excess demand, you'll have a 100% chance of failure. It won't work. You have to help people save energy to use it efficiently. And when you're going after those jobs or the procurements that Kevin was talking about, you double your money if you procure on the savings and efficiency side before you try and only get the jobs off of the new construction for the latest widgets. So you got to do these things together. And the good news is most of the new money that is earmarked in both the infrastructure bill and hopefully the federal budget reconciliation favors energy efficiency. At the moment, there isn't a mechanism for converting that new money into a set of community-based activities, and that could be a theme coming out of this conference and this overall effort. And I hope we get a chance to talk about that. Thanks, Maria.
I want to endorse what Scott just said about paying attention to the demand side. It's clearly, you have many more jobs per $1 million spent when you go to the improving efficiency part of the story. There's also a part that sometimes gets lost among efficiency enthusiasts, and that's the value of thrift. You actually can save a lot more energy by just not deciding you don't need as much. That is not a popular perspective among people who want to have their cake and eat it too, but it's actually it brings I guess I call it maybe a social side of the story in, what do we think is valuable in life? And then I also wanted to just raise one other thing that I imagine Kevin has some good stories about. I come from Rhode Island, and my brother, who's a fisherman, took me out to see the offshore wind farm up there. And it was an amazing sight, and the fish love it. And there were so many positives about it. But the biggest positive I found when I got back to shore and learned that a big job generator wasn't the construction jobs or the high-end engineering jobs, but it was for the local shipyard that finally had a chance to build tender boats to get the people out there to work on those. And that was a big boost for Little Warren, Rhode Island, and the Blount Marine there. And so it's these indirect jobs that I think are going to be an important part of the story as we look forward.
Yeah, thank you. And Joe, before you jump in, Chuck, you raised your hand a little while ago, so I want to make sure I get to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say quick. My wife works for an eye doctor on Long Beach Island, so she hears the local people talking all day long, and they all are saying the same thing. They're all saying that the wind farms are going to kill all the birds, and they're going to kill the fishing industry, both recreational and the big ones. So the scuttlebutt amongst the local people is very, very bad. And I agree with what Pat was saying, that maybe like our biggest job is to educate them that that's not the way that it works.
Actually, that's actually a perfect way to tie in, because the comment I was going to bring up from earlier was everybody did speak about the environment and concerns about climate change and global warming. And Chuck, I think you in particular, you were talking about, environmental risks from what could happen, when we build, like you just said, you were talking about people concerned about birds and fish and so on and so forth. And I think it's always important to include in the discussion that there's a defined environmental risk to not doing anything as well. In that, yes, there are concerns around access to fishing grounds. There are concerns around avian species, around bat species, but they can all be addressed. There's the added problem of, if you do nothing, then we're going to continue to be pumping fossil fuels into the air, and we're going to be continuing to further do the damage that we're already doing. And so there's always this balance, and we have to find the right balance between taking our time to make sure we do it right and make sure that we don't harm the environment and that we protect all stakeholders and we preserve our fishing grounds and so on and so forth. But we also need to move fast enough that we can confront climate change and stop the damage that we're currently doing. And so that's a very important part of the discussion that I think we're all interested in having.
I think another part of that discussion too is, so often people say, okay, so you're going to put the wind turbines up, but it's really not going to make any difference. It's still going to flood next week. It's still going to, I don't know how we come across with the correct messaging of not just, hey, we have to do it now. And it's not about what happens tomorrow. It's about the future of the planet kind of thing. But there's a lot of people out there that, they go, oh, it's not going to affect me, right? And you're going, it will affect your kids and your grandchildren, but there's no thinking along those lines. And I don't know how we message that. I think that's where I struggle is how do we get the message? We're preaching to the choir here. But how do we message this so that we get that across?
Yeah, I think that I'll take a business stab at that, and that's for investors and insurance folks and others who have to put a value on that on your property. If it basically is in risk all the time, then guess what? Your rates and such are going to continuously go up, and you might not even get.
Might be a little different and help us think about that further. So.
You might not get the coverage that you're looking for. And, insurance companies are now starting to pay attention to all of what we're talking about now as well, meaning that they're not going to give you financial backing if you are building or doing something that's in a zone, in a sense, that could be impacted by climate or climate change. So I think that's not the complete answer, but that's a futuristic reality. And adaptation is actually starting to happen now. People are saying, oh, well, we're going to have to start to adapt to these radical changes. And that's also something that's in the very near future.
I can, Kevin, specifically, you resonated with me, is we're looking at flood insurance that's going to go up to NFIP starting in October 1st. I don't know how much more clear we can make it to people, to your point, as far as financial, is that we're going to be driven out of our homes at this point. And if we're not making any kind of inroads in controlling it, who knows? I don't know how we can circumvent that, Kevin. I mean, what do? We're trying, we're educating, we're running for office, we're trying to do everything we can, but it seems that we're not making a difference, and I don't know how. And you guys are the experts. Maybe you can help us.
Yeah, and I think that's where the communication with the community, this has to be a community-wide conversation and working with folks to adapt. You know, you can't pick winners and losers in this kind of conversation. It's got to be this all-in strategy. And unfortunately, it always impacts the most vulnerable communities first. They're the ones that always get the brunt of all the bad news, all the bad air, all the bad, toxins that are in the grounds that surround them. And we need to have a concerted effort to inform, work with, and then take this as a community exercise rather than individuals exercise. And there's a lot of information. It's about how do you bring it down to folks in digestible, actionable forms, and then stick with it. It's not one of these, well, here's the pamphlet, read it, and we'll get back to you. This has got to be an all-in. And I think about this concept of a climate corps, almost like the Peace Corps, but we dispatch our students in a sense to spend all their time in this space in New Jersey, in the communities, actually working with folks to make sure that all this information that we're talking about is in their hands and they have the ability to take actions, not just to sort of, here's information. It's more about what do you do with that information and how do you weaponize it?
Well, and just to jump in to kind of follow up what Kevin was just saying, the difficulty for our community is we see money get spent so often. We see huge sums of money get spent on so many different things. And then we're telling you that the pollution is leading to X, Y, Z, and it's not a secret anymore. And then we're telling you that certain communities are literally having their trajectories changed due to pollution. And then we hear about, oh, we don't have the money for it. So that's very frustrating. It's extremely frustrating. And so what we want to do is we recognize that the solution has to be financially based. It has to be something that's showing people that it is financially viable to do it, and it's financially prudent to do it. You should do it. In the long run, it might be in a heavy investment earlier on, but later on it's going to pay off. And this is where I think the academic world and the community advocate world need to come together, because we need that information. We need that data to present when we're in those meetings to show on a graph, this is how for the next 10 years, you're going to pay this much, but after that, it's going to balance out. And then after that, you're really going to start saving. But we need to have those conversations, because the reality is speaking about things from an emotional standpoint is 100% pointless. They don't care. They don't care that people are dying. They don't care if young Black kids have asthma rates. They don't care about the people who are getting cancer. They literally don't care anything. The only thing they care about is money. So our strategies should be about showing people how the money is beneficial. And along that same line, one of the things I think the community advocates need, and Maria and I can absolutely speak to this, is when we're going into these fights, the information is coming from the polluters. So we need conversations with the academic world, because we need studies done. We need studies done where it's independent information, because many of the council people, when we're going in there, they're using the polluters data to justify their votes. We're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. So the way we fix that is to have relationships with our academic world who can provide, use the funding they're already getting to provide these services to us for free, because we can't afford to get these independent studies done. So if we can have that type of relationship, I think it can be beneficial, and there's no more speaking about the community. You're working with the community to give the community tools that we can actually use. Because like you just said, as much as we love the fact that you guys put out these very wonderful journals, the people who need to hear them don't understand that jargon. And we need to do things in addition to the journals so that we're not speaking over the people's heads. So I think that there can be a wonderful relationship between the community and the academia, but we have to take a very much more hands-on approach, and also always come from the standpoint, and this last thing I'll say, your community is not funded. Many of the people who are fighting in the community, NAACP is a volunteer organization. There are many different groups that are volunteer organizations. So when we want people to be on these councils to represent our community, one, we don't have accurate representation on those councils. Two, these councils are not paid. So that's another thing academia can step in and justify, that if you want representation, we also have to have compensation so that people can actually be there to represent their communities. So these are things that our voices alone haven't been able to move, but state organizations, statewide universities absolutely have a lot of cachet. And if you help us, you can magnify and amplify this message, and then we can actually have a fighting chance. We shouldn't be in these fights for 30 years. We have the tools to end these fights in 10 years. They don't need to be 30 or 40 or 50-year fights. Maria's tired. Maria's exhausted. I'm exhausted. Let's find a way to end these fights so we can go ahead and enjoy our summertime. You know what I mean? All right, that's it for me. I'm off my soapbox.
Thank you. Yo, Marcus, I appreciate you, right? And you and I know that struggle of being asked to give free advice all the time. You pay your consultants, but you want free advice from the community. So I definitely always want to lift that up, because that's important of how we get community members engaged and respect their time and their expertise, you know, seeing it as a value. So I have been told we have 3 minutes left. So this conversation is wonderful. It is flowing. I deeply appreciate all the panelists. And I want to remind you, it's not over. All of y'all are going to come back in the next sessions, and we're going to be able to build off of this session and incorporate it into the next, and keep talking to each other and asking each other's questions, you know? So I just want to thank all of you. I want to give you some times, like I see some things still burning. We have 3 minutes. So if we could just share those last 3 minutes. And yeah, I'll hand it back to y'all so that we can keep the program moving.
Well, I just want to make the point that Marcus, you're absolutely right. And Maria's work to do local measurement in the Ironbound is an example of how communities can co-produce the data necessary to take action. Or Chief Mann's work up in Ringwood around the Superfund site, ditto. I think that the principles here ought to be to make place matter, take charge of the new resources coming in to the extent allowed by law, and there's quite a bit there. And then third, make sure you use the money well. It's not just about spending money, it's about doing the things that'll make livable communities for everybody work, and hopefully take a big chunk out of poverty at the same time. I think you got a tremendous opportunity here because you're in New Jersey and your delegation is really well placed on these things. You don't have 30 years. In some cases, you've got 30 weeks, and in some cases, you got 30 days to get these messages across. So a good idea, unlike fine wine, doesn't get better the longer it sits on the shelf. So I hope we come out of this with some action commitments together, and it's an honor to be able to help. Thank you.
The one thing I wanted to add, and I think this builds on Marcus's argument or discussion points and some of the things that Kevin and others have said. I mean, here at Rutgers, I like to think that one of our most important roles is representing and serving the citizens of the state of New Jersey. I mean, we're the state university. That's something we should be doing. And if we're not doing it as well as we can be, then that's on us. And that's something we need to work together on our end, work with you to improve that. I noted both Sharon and Pat, I think you mentioned your coastal stewards, which is a Rutgers program. I believe that's through Cooperative Extension and Marine Extension Office, right? So we have the Rutgers Cooperative Extension Service, which is meant to help bring the academic experience out to the community, to help engage with the community, to understand what their concerns are so that we can work on that. And so I think that's something that we here at Rutgers, we just need to continue going down that road and just do it better and stronger. And I appreciate all the comments today, because it's great to know that you like us to be part of these discussions, and we want to be part of them too. And so I'm going to close with that, and thank you.
I guess I'd like to just add a closing thought that says, okay, so far we've been talking a lot about, kind of the knowledge is power theme, which I think is true and helpful, and a good point of where the academia can join with community members. But there's this other part, which is that local power is also power. And I mentioned the word veto at the very beginning, and what I meant by that was all these energy facilities need siting, and that means that there has to be give and take, and that is a point where you can veto the larger systems plans if you're systematic and fierce. And so I feel like we can't lose sight of that local power that's in your hands. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Hey, thank y'all. I love the local power. Of course, obviously, like I said, community centered. I don't want to cut the conversation off, but I do need to hand it back to Neil, and I'm only handing it 2 minutes late. So, if there was something that you have, please hold it. We want to hear what's in your heart for the next session. So I'm passing it over to Neil to take us to the next session. And thank you to all the panelists for really putting yourselves out there. I love hearing your stories, and I love hearing your passion for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, panelists. I just want to also thank the other participants for understanding that due to the great conversation that we just heard, we just felt in the middle of it that keeping that going and letting that build was really important. So we decided to hold off on bringing in the housing people. And I think we'll probably do the same with the housing panel, let the housing panel play itself out as well. And then in the third session, we're all going to come together and have that time to do that cross pollination. So that was just a really, really awesome conversation. So thank you all so much. What we're going to do now is we're going to take an artistic interlude. I'm not going to call it a break. Because I think that's not correct, and it does a disservice, because what we're going to do is we're going to hear some amazing poetry from Pamela Booker. It's going to go for about 10 minutes, and then we'll get into the next session. But I just want to give a brief introduction to Pamela. She is an interdisciplinary writing artist, educator, and eco-activist. She's on the board of the Urban Agricultural Collective, which is a nonprofit that supports local food growers and green community building. And she currently teaches writing at Montclair State University, among other colleges. In 2019, she launched where'syourtree.com, an eco arts project and podcast series dedicated to liberating storytelling and conversations on green topics, social change, and sustainable living advocacy. Her essay, Where's Your Tree? Echo Meditations and Memories of Dirt, from which she will read selections today, was published last fall in About Place Journal. And you can learn more about her projects and curiosities at where'syourtree.com, which I will put in the chat. Pamela, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Neil. Are you hearing me okay? Anyway, I've extended great thanks to everyone because I want to be conscious of the time here. I wanted to start off by saying that as a young person who grew up in Philadelphia, and one of my first jobs was actually at the Philadelphia Orchestra, and I found myself in front of the renowned opera singer, Jessie Norman, who some of you may know. And one of the questions she asked me is, what is it that you do here, young lady? And I, of course, she was just asking me about my job. But I think about this question all these years later and realize that Miss Norman's question was bigger than me then and it continues to speak to me now, which led me to a more defining question of where's your tree, which serves as part of a life quest in the work that I do as an artist and as a eco-activist, and serves as a point of entry for some of the work that I'm going to share with you today. Have you learned to grow your tree? To taste of life's sweetness when the bitter no longer satiates your soul? Are you exercising self-care is another necessary question, because self-care is really a revolutionary act. Are you exhausted? Loving the difficult, the different? From maintaining peace, cooperative spirit, do you know the quality of your mercy and your neighbors? If not, where's your tree? What's the quality of your seed? Are you planting deeply sustaining roots, or are yours questionably elusive? Are you cultivating divine soil that in toiling becomes vibrant, rich, nutrient? Where's your tree? Have you planted your conviction, your outrage, your activism, your fierceness, anger, genius? Where's your tree? Where's your tree? Our white allies, when your non-white friends, colleagues, neighbors that you brag about and love, respect, are paid less, silence, can't breathe, can't breathe, can't breathe. Where's your tree when your LGBT trans friends, strangers' children are slain in the streets, then again as social media alerts or elusive social justice muses? Where's your tree? What can we do when Black bears eat from our garbage bins and Indigenous people are shot for game on reservations designed to protect them? Where's your tree? Not to hide under or cast shade, instruments for change must be reimagined, or at the very least, exist as worthy metaphors that reveal nature's abiding intelligence. Perhaps our own, and more, as Dr. King reasoned, distinguishes the content of a nation's character. Release all that is sullied. Trust your tree, your knowledge. Hearts will open, grow deep, wild. Plant yourself here, then there, justly. Grow sacredly with an enduring mercy. And I want to give a special shout out to our South Jersey Beach friends. I spent my childhood years going to places like Brigantine, Atlantic City, Cape May, and I thank you for the work that you're doing to preserve those shorelines for us. This is called Signs. A sign reads, "Lifeguard is not on duty." Another sign reads, "Beware of pipelines." There are no prepositions in these warnings. The shoreline is filled with directness, verbs, crushing waves, and serpents, as life must be on certain days. The lighthouse stands as tall as Jack in his beanstalk calls to me. I walked 191 steps, 7 platforms on which to rest, only to gag through scratched breaths at the historical sightline, peering through magnified windows. Life is vast. The shoreline is balding, though sometimes excised, filled with foggy navigations or stentorian horns. At this end of the Cape May's zephyr, winds call to me, gentle and enchanting, so too does my mother. Eco-mediations. Where once we were intimate, liberated herds, we now segregate, isolated and unequal again. Socialization is measured in distance. Distance is critical to survival, yet we are grazers. Masked crusaders extant, protocols limit and foreshadow to touch. Gather ourselves in tens today, 20. Tomorrow is sure to find sorrow, swirling from human swagger. We are lethal weapons to ourselves and to others. Learn to two-step alone in place, sheltered. Where once we were a flowering species, we find ourselves mangled plant extracts, cacti without succulents, spiny, fraught, reduced airflow in the cavities of tubular chests. Respirators resuscitate or flatten curves, and last wishes, shallow root systems sustain engorged flesh and dispositions. The healthy must fight to retain juice. We feel more sap than crystal clear water. Fluid retention is essential to trance inspiration. Drink life. Adaptation is how we survive. Drink life. Hug wisdom. Drink life. Live with fewer toes, less ego, bigger storage organs. Thrive in the future with minimal care and maximum caring. And I'll just close on an excerpt from a larger piece that I did in homage to Whitman's Song of Myself. And the first line is a direct quote from, I think, section 5 of his poem. There will never be any more perfection than there is now, as the hugging and loving woman sleeps at my side through the night. With her, there is great rapture. Playgrounds and sandlots were the sanctuaries of my youth. My new lover is the world, a companion that maturity craves. She makes me trimmer. She makes me laugh. Mother Earth, at the divine parts of myself, fleeting shadows tearing at the delicate films of my psyche. With her, I have learned to love again and again, even my disappointments. With her, I am wit, fiction, criticism, outrage, enchantment, sometimes joy. She makes me trimmer. She makes me laugh. Mother Earth. She makes me trimmer. She makes me laugh. Mother Earth. Thank you all.
Pamela, thank you so much. That first of all, I want to say happy birthday, because it's Pamela's birthday today, and she was so kind enough to take time out of her birthday to join us and just give us that really powerful, and for me, just a very uplifting performance. And I wrote my first book was about the tree planting in the 1930s during the first Green New Deal. But your poem on Where's Your Tree really made me just rethink the whole concept. So thank you so much and happy birthday. Wonderful. We're now off to our second session of the day on housing. And we have two co-moderators for that session. I'll introduce them very, very quickly, and then we'll get right into that session. One of the co-moderators is James Williams. He's the Director of Racial Justice Policy at the Fair Share Housing Center. And he's going to be joined by Amanda Devicker-Ranier, the Executive Director of the New Jersey Resource Project and the New Jersey Organizing Project. NJOP is a grassroots organization based in New Jersey's Shore and South Jersey regions. So I'll turn it over to you both, and thank you very much for coming and leading the session.
Thank you so much, Neil. And thank you gigantically to Maria and all of the participants in the first panel, and also to Pamela. It's been, I'll be honest, I was like, 4 hours is a long meeting, but I am not feeling that way. I'm actually feeling really energized. So James and I are going to share a little background on this session. I'm kicking it off, and then James is going to kind of facilitate us through the conversation with some help from me as we move forward. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Here we go. Okay. So we want to talk about housing because we believe housing is an environmental issue. And I think there's a lot of ways that housing is an environmental issue, but I also want to say that in New Jersey, housing is such a core struggle, and it has been in so many ways and for many years for many communities. So just, I want to say that. And I'll come back to that slide later. So first of all, I think we know, right, New Jersey is one of the fastest warming states in the country. So we're already seeing climate impacts that other places are not seeing, although I think more and more folks are beginning to experience climate impacts. This has been kind of a wild summer for flooding, rainstorms, droughts, wildfires. So we're starting to see that more and more. Just for context, and this is actually Beth in the photo who's going to be one of our participants, sea level Atlantic City has risen almost 18 inches since we started tracking sea level rise. And so we just want to sort of frame one of the big issues we've taken up as New Jersey Thrives, in addition to how we shift our energy and reduce our carbon footprint, like folks were saying, how we do that equitably and fairly, how our communities have a seat at a table, have jobs, have benefits, is also this question of what's going to happen to our housing and communities as we experience these climate impacts. So this is a photo from a report that we often refer to at NJOP from the Union of Concerned Scientists, which is Underwater, Rising Seas, Chronic Floods, and the implications for people's houses. New Jersey has so many homes that are at risk, and this isn't for like a Sandy style storm. This is for what folks call tidal flooding, sunny day flooding, chronic flooding. It's flooding that's just happening because we're now living with an amount of water that is potentially unmanageable. And so this is like how this is going to affect the whole state. You can sort of see, looking at the image on the left is 2100, so it's many years away, but the image on the right is actually 2050. So what we really want to consider today is like, these are people, these are communities, these are people in communities that are already struggling with systemic inequities. What does it look like if we think about housing and climate interconnected and think of those as environmental issues that we want to solve by taking bold action with this opportunity that we have right now, as maybe once in my lifetime style federal legislation moves through Congress. But I think one of the big challenges we face, and I'm excited to like pass this over to James, is that oftentimes these sort of outside experts are the ones that make decisions about how money is spent, how things are allocated, what happens, not our communities. So how are we really connecting the expertise that's in our communities? Because folks, you know, like Pat, Sharon, like you guys were very kind to refer to the academics as experts, and they are, but y'all are experts too in your own experience and what your communities need. So how are we making sure to connect these potentials to our community's expertise in partnership with folks like y'all? And how do we address some of the deep underlying issues that have existed in New Jersey around housing questions? So I'm going to hand it over to James from Fair Share Housing. And we've worked together for years, actually, since Sandy hit NJOP and Fair Share Housing. And it's been a really great collaboration. James, and just tell me when you want me to forward the slides.
Oh, great. So thank you guys for having me. Thank you to Maria, and what a tough presentation to follow, Pamela. Very, very powerful. I was trying to figure out a way to get out of it altogether, just because of just the energy you brought. It's the group that follows up Marvin Gaye, right? Like nobody wants to go on stage. So we have an amazing group of speakers to really discuss housing, and before that we can get into some more of the slides. So next slide. So as you can see from this chart here, and one of the overwhelming things that should jump out at you is that, you know, some of the cities that are listed on here are some of the most poverty-stricken in the state. And the fact that from this listing, you have 5 out of the 20 most affected cities in the country are cities from New Jersey. So when you look at Atlantic City, should be no surprise, but to see Hoboken, to see Camden, Penns Grove, and Salem gives you an idea of the areas that will be the most disproportionately impacted by rising sea levels over the next 20 to 25 years. Next slide. So what can we do? I think that's one of the most difficult things. So having, and when Amanda and I approached, well, it was like a Jerry Maguire kind of movie. It was like, she had me at hello. When she approached me with this topic, it was based on the premise of a concept for policy advocates that we hardly ever get an opportunity to do. And it was really about being proactive. Usually everything that we do is reactive. We're always reacting to the moment, but this is an opportunity to be proactive. How do we get state and federal legislators on board to an issue that is 25 years from now? And that's difficult because even now, as we advocate, we're still in the grips of a global pandemic. So how do we get others to start to shift and focus their thoughts and their energy on something that that is not yet here yet? And that's a difficult task, to appropriate funds, manpower, resources, intellectual capital into an event that hasn't really struck yet. But I think this is an opportunity for us to be proactive. Next slide. So when we look at the areas that are going to face the highest rates of displacement, once again, no surprise, Atlantic City, Hoboken, Camden, Penns Grove, Salem, Burlington, Long Branch, Newark, Jersey City, Vineland, and it continues. So when you look at Jersey City and Newark, I think, these are the two largest cities in New Jersey by our current census data. I think Newark, quote unquote, beat out Jersey City for the largest city in the state. But when you think about the ramifications of what that means for our two of our largest cities, to be faced with that, and these are two cities that are probably the telltale story of what Dr. King talked about when you talk about the two Americas. Newark and Jersey City are both faced with rising amounts of development and economic growth, but also with strict amount of low-end poverty. So, what does it look like for the individuals on the low end of that? Salem and Camden, forgive me, I am a Camden kid, born and raised, and still a Camden resident, reflect a lot of the poverty that we often advocate for, and often goes overlooked in South Jersey. And then because we have some of what we call the deep South Jerseyans on here as well, recognizing that Atlantic City and Penns Grove and areas like that are also going to be decimated by displacement over the next 20 to 25 years. Next slide.
Either it's stuck or that's it.
Oh, that could be it. So, well, there it is. So we can get ready to get into our speakers for today. So we have four amazing community partners that will be speaking. We have Allison, who is going to be speaking. She's going to be representing Atlantic County. We've got Beth that's going to be coming on from Ventura. We have Roy Jones, not the boxer, but a champion for the people nonetheless. And last and certainly not least, I'm very biased. We have my own personal councilwoman, Councilwoman Shnika. I've had the opportunity to meet her several times. Her and my neighbor are really good friends, and she and I have spoken. So I am biased that I do have a councilwoman that advocates and champions these issues, not only at the city council level, but here in these types of forums. So she really cares about these issues. So let's go around the room and give our esteemed participants an opportunity to kind of give us their thoughts on how housing is such a unique way to talk about Green New Deal, environmental justice, and environmental factors, and how it fits into there. So let me pitch it to Allison first, and hear your thoughts.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Amanda. I'm Allison Arnay. I'm an organizer with New Jersey Organizing Project, and I'm a former Atlantic City resident, and currently live in Western Atlantic County, right on the Vineland border, actually. So yeah, housing and how it comes into respect with the Green New Deal. And I think there used to be a time when we said like natural disasters got a 2-week blip on the news cycle right before people started forgetting. And I think it's probably even less now that we see so many disasters happening, and the severity just increasing. It doesn't seem like we even see disasters focused on for a couple of weeks anymore in the news cycle. But then there's this other disaster that's been happening, and this is this trickling out of shore and coastal communities due to being priced out of our homes. After Superstorm Sandy, our family was displaced and then separated. And we didn't see it happening because it actually happened a good 2 years afterwards. But our landlord, he couldn't afford to raise the house. And because he couldn't afford to mitigate for future storms and for the sunny day flooding that we were already seeing, he put the house up for sale. And we started looking for a new place in case the new landlord or the new owner didn't want to rent out again, or in case they increased the rent to a point that we couldn't afford it. We moved out and we thought we would find a space of our own, and that didn't happen. It was hard enough to find a place that we could afford before Sandy hit. And then after Superstorm Sandy, the inventory was just so low. The recovery rate around the state was really abysmal as far as getting people back into their homes. And I think you would see that in certain communities, especially mine in Atlantic City, we're even further behind others in the states, other communities in the state. So you had a limited housing market, and you had landlords who had the ability to increase rates to rates that most of us couldn't afford, which, like I said, caused my family to be displaced out of Atlantic City. And we separated it into 2 households, actually. And that broke up our family forever. And so, you know, this was a disaster that was happening before COVID hit. And certainly before Sandy, we know how high housing rates are in New Jersey. But as we're seeing water levels rise and people not being able to mitigate, they're either leaving or being forced to move from their homes. And then we're seeing an increased gentrification. Like climate change is a huge catalyst right now because it's giving people the ability to swap in and purchase homes and properties for much less than they may have before. So sadly, we're seeing our communities deteriorate and not be able to advocate together because we're all slowly trickling out.
Thank you, Allison. And you know, for Atlantic City just has such a rich history as being one of the epicenters for not only economic growth but cultural diversity in the state. It's we are fighting to ensure that Atlantic City gets back to where it needs to be in the state, because for a long time it was the lifeblood for New Jersey. That boardwalk kept the literal lights on for this state for decades. My mother retired from the Casino Control Commission, so I spent many a work day and a weekend down in Atlantic City. So that is a second home to me. So now I'm going to kick it to Beth from Venture City and allow her to weigh in and tell us her thoughts on how housing fits into the environmental justice conversation.
Hi, I'm Beth from Ventnor. I'm right next to Atlantic City. New Jersey Organizing Project member. I'm a survivor of a disaster. I think that the rising sea levels, the flooding is, it's just so important and we need to address it. I've been going through this for just about 9 years now. I'm just getting home now. I'm still not finished, but I'm just getting home. And there's so many people behind me that haven't even started yet. I think addressing first the issues of the flooding and how to mitigate is, of utmost important. But the broken system that disaster victims have to go through and the clawbacks that happened after you're actually home after 9 years needs to be addressed, because I don't want this, I'm doing this for myself, don't get me wrong, but I don't want this to happen to anyone ever again. This is 9 years is just a ridiculous amount of time, for disaster victims. But we do need to address mitigation and the sea level rise and the environment. It's, our future.
All right. Once again, gonna kick it over to, and I'm looking to make sure that he's on. Is Roy on?
I see a square that says Roy Jones.
There
but
he
it's
is.
not
There
the
he is.
downstairs squares. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there he is. A champion for the people. And sorry if that joke lands flat, but Roy Jones was a pretty successful boxer in his time. So I'm certain Roy has heard that before. So hopefully he laughs at it. But I'm going to pitch it over to Roy and let him weigh in on how housing fits into the environmental justice landscape.
Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can. Thank you, Roy.
Oh, great. So good afternoon, and I do appreciate the opportunity to give my comments, my thoughts about all of this. I just want to let you know a couple things about me. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. I moved to Atlantic City. We have a family home in Atlantic City. It was completely destroyed by Hurricane Sandy. I had moved back by that time and tried to get my family's house rebuilt. It was a complete nightmare. And I've lived also over 40 years in Camden. So I'm going to speak to the scandalous nature of disasters and housing rebuilding after disasters. And so what I know about Atlantic City is that first, the state told us that, and the federal government told us that we had to renovate the existing house. So we got X amount of dollars to do that. Then the state comes along after a scandal with the contractor and then told us to, tear the house down that we just put $50,000 or $60,000 into and rebuild it with the remaining money that you got from Sandy. So the house to this day has not been rebuilt. And sadly, my oldest brother passed in the efforts to try to rebuild this property. Very sad tragedy. It affected me. It's still affecting me. So I think one of the things I do want to say is that in order to understand where we want to go in the future, we must understand the past. So there has to be a full investigation of the failure of Sandy funds as it relates to what should have happened in New Jersey in order to appropriately move forward. So that's one of my recommendations right off the cuff, because it was a nightmare for us. It's still a nightmare for my family. It's still a nightmare for me. It's still a tragedy. It's a situation that I'm in it to seek justice and to see that justice is done. But by living in Camden, also, I was introduced to a stormwater flooding and just basic flooding. And Camden has a horrible problem as well with just a basic type flooding issue. So one of the things I just want to share with everybody is this: unless we advocate to our federal legislators and our state legislators that there has to be accountability and oversight of all federal monies coming into these states, or else the same thing will happen over and over again that happened during Sandy. The politicians will take over, and we all know in New Jersey, there are 14 political bosses that run certain regions of Camden. I live in South Jersey. That political boss is George Norcross. and he affects most of the 7 counties in South Jersey. So my point, these political bosses are salivating over the fact that trillions of dollars will be coming into their counties in the name of the Green New Deal and in the name of infrastructure. So a second recommendation I want to put on the table is that we need to advocate to the federal government, to the Biden administration, that every community, every town needs to have a formal mandated environmental justice commission as a part of the community engagement, oversight, and accountability issue that needs to take place. So I just wanted to share that with you. And as we talk about what else we can do and some of the things that we need to do, I just want to share this one other thing about Atlantic City that I noticed as an environmental justice advocate. There are 3 ways to get into Atlantic City, and maybe there's 4 ways if you have an airplane. But unless the issue of elevating highways in and out of Atlantic City is done, potentially during a major disaster, people will be trapped and many people will die. So elevating major highways in and out of Atlantic City is a critical infrastructure issue that we need to talk about. The second thing is, or the third thing, I can't keep up with it, but the point is, Atlantic City ultimately, as the data said, is rising, the sea level is rising. So the one thing that's not rising are the roads. So on any given day, on just a high tide day, if you're driving down the Black Horse or the White Horse Pike, you can see how potentially a flood could happen and you could not get into Atlantic City. So I just wanted to put those things on the table, and then to share that unless we address accountability and oversight of funding coming into these communities in the name of the Green New Deal and in the name of infrastructure, the political people will hijack these funds. The unions, who are traditionally very racist, very discriminatory, will hijack these funds. And people in Camden and Atlantic City will still be poor years later. Years later. One quick note. I did an analysis of all the federal funds that came to Camden in the name of the Community Development Block Grant Program. Over 30 years, $322 million. Camden is one of the poorest cities in New Jersey, yet over 300 plus millions of dollars came into this city to rebuild it and to improve the lives of people. We cannot continue to have the federal government pour monies into cities without adequate oversight and without adequate accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Roy. A quick note about time. We got just a couple more minutes for this before we move it on, but I didn't want to cut you off because
okay, I'm sorry.
That was really astounding.
That was amazing.
Yeah. Okay.
No problem. So we're gonna definitely make space for our last community participant as well, but we also want to start to tee up our academic participants for our housing discussion. If they could just go ahead and go camera on, so that way we can make the transition smoothly and cleanly. So we have Giovanna, Tony, Laura, and Jill. I see they're all here and ready. So we're going to toss it over to my councilwoman, Shanika, and have her to say some words. And directly from Shanika, we'll head right over to our esteemed partners in academia, so they can weigh in on this conversation, and we can pitch it back over to Neil. So Shanika. There we go.
Thank you, and I'm really pleased to be here today. It's really hard to follow up behind Mr. Jones, who is a great community advocate. He joined us in some illegal dumping activity within the community. So one of the things that I want to say before I kind of jump off is that as a newly elected official for about 19 months now, what I recognize is that there are a lot of things in conflict. You know, as we start to talk about being proactive opposed to reactive, you run into issues of what was, what is, and what will be. And it is very difficult to try to manage all three things at the same time. I'm very happy that we're framing this conversation and talking about environment and housing, because I think that those things really run well together. In a city like Camden, if you look around in any direction, you really see the impacts almost daily. And so I worked even in Atlantic County for about 4 years, and I used to be afraid sometimes driving into Atlantic City for the reasons that Mr. Roy outlined, that there was times that I was literally stuck in the middle of so much water, I didn't think that I would be able to get out because I couldn't open my car. I've experienced those same things in Camden City, but they were more related to stormwater than they were to, shoreline. So as a councilwoman, some of the things that I work on is really trying to address some of these issues. And while trying to do some of those things, we sometimes run up against community activists, up against government, up against the establishment. And I find it really difficult to navigate where we should be for housing, trying to fight every front and make change and be proactive. So in Camden, we have been looking at emergency responses. So we started looking at microgrids, because we know if we run into a natural disaster, we'll need that resiliency within the community to be able to keep emergency operations flowing. We have been studying stormwater and working with many folk within the state to try to figure out that problem within the city. We have been working on projects that also look at what we need to do for our shorelines. And in the community on housing, how all of this impacts our housing. And we know that based on just all the research that we look at, there's a possibility that, portions of the city will be underwater. Particularly, I am concerned because where I live, I'm on the waterfront. And just as a result of history that we've seen within our city, we know generally they will take care of certain areas over others. And so I'm extremely concerned about the neighborhood in which I am staying. So as a person who is an elected official, you could see that there's always a lot of, I would say sometimes resentment towards leaders, and it makes it hard to be a leader. And it makes it really hard to figure out what to do when you want to do the right thing. And a lot of the times I would say to the community activists, when you have someone on your side, you have to fight with them. I think that there is a gut reaction to always fight everybody in politics, because there is an assumption or belief that everybody is the same. But that makes it really hard for people in this type of a position to partner with you when they want to have the change that you want to have the change, to tackle some of these issues together in a progressive way. So that's what we want to do. That's what we've been trying to do. That's what we've been looking at. But we come up against a lot of fights, and that makes it sometimes really difficult to move the needle forward, because we do have some data. We're not just taking data from anywhere. We are getting data from the places that we need to get it from. And we are trying to figure out ways to jump ahead and listen to community input. And I do think that in Camden, although we don't get a lot of credit, because this is fairly new, right? When you have somebody who comes in who believes in change, you have to convince people, especially elected officials, or especially the establishment, or especially government, that changes have to be made, because most of the time people think that they're doing a good thing and they're doing the right thing. But earlier when I said that there are things in conflict, it is really hard to talk about jobs and securing more jobs, because people bring that up, and then talk about the impact on climate or the impact on air, or just the overall impact. Some of those things come in conflict. And as an elected official, you have to be able to do all of those things and dance to that tune at the same time. But we don't give up on that. And I'm happy to be here today to be able to listen and learn with this group, because like I said, we want to absolutely be proactive and try to figure out additional approaches that we can take in the event that, the planet is going to be warming up. We are excited about everything that is coming down in this Green New Deal plan, because I believe that we could utilize some of that money to do things that we know we should be doing. And again, just like it was mentioned earlier, as we talk about solar or we talked about wind, the research sometimes is not always readily available in a way that we can use it to propel and not be reactive. So again, I'm just, here happy to add a voice of a person who is in politics and understand that in government, it is really difficult to do things quickly and be transparent at the same times. And there's a level of regulations, but also wanting to make sure that we are, as proactive as we can be with the restraints that we have. And still learning, because although this New Deal policy is coming out, what we are able to do with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And it's great to transition over to our friends in higher ed. Oftentimes, higher education, they're deemed the ones that just do research for the sake of doing research. So now we have individuals that want to take what they do and actually input it into the framework for creating and effectuating change in our communities now. And that's really effective, because their intellectual capital and their academic prowess is needed in this space. They research and they can look at these things in a way that allows us to have the data information that we as advocates need to go forward and talk to our legislators and talk to the powers that be, so that we can do what needs to get done in our community. So our first speaker is going to be Giovanna Rosen, and she's coming to us from Rutgers University.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So just wanted to follow the lead of the academics in the prior panel and to think mostly about what I have to offer. And just really quickly wanted to say that some of my research focuses on community benefits. And I think one thing to offer is that community benefits are how we often deal with environmental justice issues in contemporary development, thinking about offsetting harm of individual projects, and that the Green New Deal allows us to think a little bit more broadly and to deal with that scale problem of community benefits organizing. So would be happy to help you contribute to the conversation there. And then just thinking broadly about how housing is an environmental issue, the prior panelists, I think, had some really important insights into that. But as someone with a background in urban planning, I wanted to offer that housing is an environmental issue, not just as a potential risk and problem, but as a potential solution. And as someone who's Californian, and so we're used to our sky being orange regularly during the fall now, climate change is here. And it's easy to ignore it when we're not under immediate duress. But I think it's really important that we think about the ways in which we can cut carbon emissions and build more sustainable and resilient communities. And planning has a lot to offer there in thinking through how we design and orient cities, how we work with communities to envision a radical and different future. And how we build more densely and consider different land use that helps people live without being so carbon dependent. And so I think that it's really important that we think about it, not just as a problem, but as this potential solution. And something that we know very clearly is that housing is absolutely central. And the pandemic has only clarified this, that safe, stable, and affordable housing is absolutely central to people's well-being and a necessary prerequisite to people being able to thrive. And one of the prior panelists mentioned that we can't expect people to prioritize long-term environmental organizing and strategizing unless they have their immediate needs met. And so I think for all of these different reasons, it's not only right, but it's our obligation to think about housing as part of an environmentally sustainable future and a central axis of environmental justice. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a wonderful plug, though probably not intentional, about, NJ Thrive. Like we need to thrive. I appreciate that, Giovanna. So next we're going to kick it over to Laura, who's also coming to us from Rutgers University, the School of Planning and Public Policy. So Laura, thank you for attending, and we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be able to have this conversation and hear everyone's stories. I'm originally from Atlanta, but I moved up to New Jersey to study coastal adaptation. And it's really a great area to be studying this just because there's so much going on. I lived in Puerto Rico for 5 years, so I lived near the ocean, lived near the shoreline, and these problems that we're experiencing in New Jersey, we're experiencing them in many other parts of the world as well. And I think what's so interesting about initiatives at Rutgers is trying to foster these academic and community partnerships so that the research that we're doing in school really responds to problems that are going on the ground. Like, I don't think there's this, I think our institutions are evolving, so there's not as much division between academia and experts on the ground. We're really trying to gather and come together. So it's exciting to see that happen. And hearing from the stories that you all have been telling today, I feel validated, continually validated in the research and the work that I'm pursuing, which I am focusing on evaluating federal programs for investing in hazard mitigation efforts in the coastal zone and coastal adaptation from a social equity perspective. So particularly looking at FEMA's hazard mitigation grant programs and how they fund elevations and acquisitions, and hearing Royal stories and hearing the stories of other community members of kind of the traumas that they've been through dealing with how that is implemented in practice just sheds light on the real difference between how a policy might be formulated in theory and how it actually is felt on the ground in practice. So what's exciting, I think, in this space is that there is a lot of opportunity to have like an evolving governance system that's more reflective about, well, are our policies really shaping up the way they were intended? And how can we maybe improve them? There's a lot of open data, a lot of open resources that we can now kind of map out. Where are elevations? Where are buyouts happening? How are they affecting communities? And talking to people at the same time about their experiences, I think we can learn a lot more. So I'm excited to be part of this conversation and thinking about these equity and efficiency trade-offs as we try to adapt to these massive challenges in the coastal zone. I think a big challenge is just thinking about the general vision of what do we want our shoreline to look like in general, and also thinking about things from a historical perspective, like what did things look like 50 years ago even? My dad grew up in New York on Long Island, and I'm sure that the island back then and the Jersey Shore 50 years ago is not what it is today. So, thinking about really what is sustainable, what is a good process of transition to new realities, what can we really, what can we afford to do, and how are we going to manage transitions in a way that is effective and just? So these are kinds of problems that I'm interested in tackling, and it's really interesting to be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Great. So our next speaker will be, forgive me, we have Jill Hamburg. She is coming to us from Pratt Institute, also in planning and from the Department of Environment. So Jill, it is a pleasure to have you. You're still on mute, Jill.
I'm a part-time visiting professor at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. Perhaps the only non-New Jersey person on this this whole discussion. And the department is the Graduate Center for Planning and the Environment, which is essentially the urban planning department. I guess my main contribution to the discussion is just to mention some things, many of which I'm sure you're already aware of, but some of the kinds of issues and debates and things that have come up in New York. One is the energy efficiency in housing. Housing, at least in New York City, is one of the major buildings, including housing, are the single major source of greenhouse gases, of energy. And so there's a lot of discussion about not just fuel, but also all the other ways of doing energy audits and from green roofs or cool roofs or weatherization, passive construction, et cetera. So things both for existing housing and for rebuilding that might be taken into account. Second is the the debate about mitigation versus, in some cases where it's appropriate, a term which I don't like, but is become the term of art, managed retreat buyouts. And a number of you have alluded to areas that are likely to be flooded in X number of years. And so there are many debates about that and the role of stakeholder involvement in those decisions. I'm part of a group that's of women urban planners that's got a contract to work with folks in Rockaway for an area where there have been buyouts and planning for what's going to happen there afterwards. There's also huge debates, for instance, in the Lower East Side about building up a barrier, a storm barrier, and the way that was planned and designed was huge debates. Next issue that may or may not happen in Jersey, at least not in the same way, but if climate gentrification, you may have heard about it in Miami, where since Miami Beach already floods on sunny days, the real estate in higher areas is getting very expensive and pushing out low-income folks. And then finally, the whole question of public housing, and that is one of the key things that's maybe part of the Green New Deal and infrastructure, and that many public housing developments are located in vulnerable land, and the importance of renovation and climate protection for those projects.
Thank you, Jill. And with so many New Yorkers making their way over to New Jersey, you're welcome to claim New Jersey as part of your home as well.
I've lived in Jersey for a number of years and have visited most of Jersey.
There you go. There you go. So Jersey's a home to everyone, especially New Yorkers. And last but certainly not least, we're going to kick it to our last panelist from our academic section, Tony Schumann. He is coming to us from NJIT, their School of Architecture.
So I'm married into New Jersey. My wife is from Bridgewater, and my theory is that everyone is either from New Jersey or winds up there. And I've been living in New Jersey for 25 years, and I've been teaching at NJIT for 40. So I can't call myself a Newarker, which is where we're located, but I do have some sense of life in New Jersey. Let me first of all say, as an architect, I've been engaged in community assistance in various forms since I was in school, which was a very long time ago. So the notion of community-led discussion or community-led redevelopment, I subscribe to that fully. By the same token, I grasp the frustration that's expressed by any number of the speakers in both panels. I'm thinking particularly of Roy Jones talking about, basically the skepticism about what happens when the federal government does come through with money and how it gets perverted once it hits the ground. And by the same token, the councilwoman spoke quite poignantly about how difficult it is to be in the public sector when people don't have a level of trust. I don't claim to have any serious firsthand knowledge of Southern New Jersey, but I do have an abiding interest in one particular project in Camden, and that's what's called at the outset Yorkshire Village. I think now it's called Fairview. And it was housing that was built by the federal government for shipyard workers during the First World War. And it got, in my view, a lot of things right. It had a range of housing type from single family to attached to quad housing to rental apartments. It included a supermarket and office space. There was plans for a church. I don't know if that was ever built. And I know that's been taken over and renovated. Someone from Camden can tell me whether that's successful or not. But periodically, the federal government has done things right. And then they somehow slither off the hook. So it seems to me that rather than retreat from relying on the federal government, we have to continue to press them. Working in Newark, for the last 20 years, I've been on the board of a group in the Lincoln Park neighborhood called Lincoln Park Coast Cultural District. And our goal is to create an arts district, a green arts district in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. And that's involved building housing. And we got victimized by the collapse of the housing market in 2008. So I have some more firsthand familiarity with what life is like on the ground. and it's incredibly difficult. So Newark has problems that may resonate, particularly when the councilwoman said, well, here the problem may be more stormwater than rising sea level. And speaking of Camden, Newark has its stormwater problems. Some of that pertain to the combined sewer outlet. And the point that Jill Hamburg made about public housing being built in vulnerable areas, or areas maybe that are more prone to flooding. There are such a long series of ironies about that, because yes, the public housing for the most part was built in the old waterfront warehouse districts when that was considered low rent land. So then what happened? Suddenly people rediscover the waterfront, renovate that housing, try to renovate it, or try to evict the poorer people, working class people, and open the way for private investment. So on the one hand, the wealthier people may move in, and on the other hand, maybe nature takes its revenge when it starts to flood. And of course, we saw this in Miami just 2 weeks ago. There are a couple of things that are worth mentioning. If we expand that definition of environmental impact with housing, there are issues that pertain to Newark and probably Camden, and I apologize if they may be less relevant in the shore communities, but I could be wrong about that. One is Newark, I think it leads the nation in heat island. That is to say, the production of extra degrees of temperature because of the amount of asphalt and concrete on the surface. It also has one of the fewest levels of green space per person. And green space is a means of what some people call green infrastructure, soft infrastructure. It can mitigate storm damage and stormwater runoff and provide all kinds of amenities for neighborhoods. So that may be something that could factor into sort of long-term thinking about housing and environment. I'm going to stop there. I certainly don't have any prescriptions for people. I very much enjoyed the presentations and want to hear the rest of this discussion.
So, sorry, Tutor just keeps cutting on. I'm going to, you guys have heard enough from me, so I'm going to kick it over to my much more capable partner and fellow moderator, Amanda, to pose some of the questions to some of our panelists.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Quick question to Neil. I don't see Scott in our, or Roy in our kind of panel Brady Bunch squares. Is Scott?
I've told them about Roy.
Okay.
And Scott's not on this one. Scott was in the first panel.
Oh, I'm sorry. Terrible. Okay, thank you.
So they're trying to get Roy back on right now.
All right, awesome. So I'm hearing some really interesting and distinct themes. And to me, they're really related to questions of power and control. Who belongs, who doesn't, who decides, who doesn't. And I think there are a lot of different ways we can go with this discussion. But one thing that I know I've struggled with as an organizer for a long time is imagining what it would be like to actually be in power. And we define power in my tradition of organizing as the ability to be able to make the decisions about what happens to life and community. That's what power is. So let's just take a guess or a gander here. Oh, I hear a little background noise. Is it me? I think it might be 20. 20, I'm going to mute you. Yes, I'm going to mute you. Okay. And so there's a bunch of money, and we're going to talk about this in our last section too, that's in discussion now in Congress, both this Senate bipartisan infrastructure package, a possible reconciliation package, and even President Biden just moved a bunch of grant money to FEMA for mitigation, but it's not entirely clear what that means. That doesn't have to be voted on for Congress. So I just want to ask our participants, let's assume that Congress does the right thing and we get some of this money and that the money comes to New Jersey. Number one, if you had control over some chunk of this money, what would you do in your community? And then number two, follow-up question, what do we need to do to be in a position to have control over this money? So just curious, who wants to jump in? I know, big question. That's what's at stake.
I mean, I could jump in.
Yeah.
I could jump in if it's me, based on some of the things that we've been wanting to do. I would love to have enough research, and when I say research, so knowing already, what avenues we can take and what's the best avenue to take. Because sometimes we don't have enough readily available research with all of the options because we generally get a handful. So I would love to have enough, money to have all of that research available. So as a person who has to make decisions sometimes, I know that I can make the best decision based on the information that I have and be able to have somebody run a cost benefit analysis that is, like it was stated earlier, that is completely independent of everyone. So we know what we have to give up to get what we're trying to accomplish. And then what I would say is I would love to really, I would rather jump in on some of the environmental things, kind of like Roy mentioned. What can we do on the shore side to make sure we're building up to what we have to do with roads? Like in Camden, if you're going through the Admiral Wilson, I was told that they built it like a bridge. So although you may not see it, like they built it like a bridge because it is raised a little bit. So like what kind of work do we need to do like that for infrastructure to try to secure? I remember in Atlantic County, they started making people put their houses up like on bricks a little bit, but like, what is that going to impact? So for us to kind of know what can we do with that money in regard to infrastructure that we could build to respond to what we think is coming, or is there anything that we really can do, or are we going in the right direction, trying to have like microgrids or power structures, or should we be moving people away from those areas, and how do we do it? And how quickly can we make that happen without displacing people? Because I mean, displacement will be a little bit of it, but not a total displacement. So those are some of the, what I would say, out of the box things. And then really creating hubs of innovation so that you can get creative, because what I think is lacking is innovation. Like government, there's no funding for innovation in government mainly, right? So when people say you guys are coming up with stale things, it's like, because that's what we have. The resources are not there. So I would love for there to be funding for really innovation to try things, because I know in science, you have to try, fail, and try again. So I just wish that we have an opportunity to have some innovation funding so we could try some things, but as rapidly as possible.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for jumping in and like also being the first person to share ideas. Beth's got her hand up, so I'm gonna go to Beth, but Roy, also you were unmuted. So I'm assuming you wanna contribute, and I'll have you come in after Beth. But yeah, you're up.
Okay,
Yep.
I don't know if I was on mute or not. I agree with everything that the councilwoman said, and Roy especially, because our stories seem to be intertwined, and I feel the same as him, and I think he spoke very well about everything. I also think I would like to take part of that money and make people whole again, especially those who are still struggling. I mean, this is just awful. It's almost a decade, and I think that we have to take care of them in order before we could do anything else. People that are having clawbacks after 10 years, they need to be made whole and not live in fear. So that was what I would do, in addition to what the councilwoman said.
Thanks, Beth. And like, there's people that lost their homes to foreclosure, or like, like let's have a brave imagination. Like, what if we could get people their houses back that lost it because of a broken disaster recovery system? We could get them back in their communities. Like,
we need to make everybody whole again. This is a decade. So yes.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Beth. Roy. I'm going to ask you to unmute. I'm sorry. I think I forcibly muted you.
Okay.
There you are.
Okay. So what will we do with the money? And how should the process go? I think first, we should decentralize how these federal funds are dispensed in communities, vulnerable and non-vulnerable communities. And by decentralization, I mean, it should go to NGOs, grassroots organizations that's already on the ground doing great work that are underfunded. And this money should be, a portion of that money should be targeted to groups that are already on the ground, but are totally underfunded. In terms of control, unless we codify, put into law that there should be environmental justice commissions and an environmental justice inspector general that oversee and deal with this accountability issue, the politicians will run off with the money. And I can't stress that enough. I've been an activist. I came to Camden in 1967, and I helped desegregate Rutgers in 1969. And I've seen, this is over 49 years. I've seen black mayors, white mayors, brown mayors commit the same crimes and repeat the same failed approaches over and over again. So I'm a radical as it relates to how money should come into community. It should not, if I know that's not practical, that it should not go to the government first, but it should, at some point, we need to consider what part and efforts and initiatives that money needs to be decentralized and go directly to NGOs like Fair Share Housing, like a lot of the community housing groups in Camden, like housing groups in Newark and everywhere. These groups are actually doing marvelous work without grant support. And as I said before, of $322 million, it's pitiful what amount of money went to community-based organizations. It's pitiful. And so unless we codify that every community must have an environmental justice commission to oversee and be responsible and accountable for this money and have community engagement efforts as a part of this law, we will repeat the same failed approaches that we've been doing for the last 100 years.
Thank you, Roy. Are there any other of our panelists that want to jump in, or our academic folks that have some sort of thoughts to, oh, Scott put it in the chat. Thank you so much. That are potential responses to this. And then I know James has a follow-up question.
I have, this is Tony. It's a question for Roy Jones. When you're proposing the money go directly to the community organizations, and as someone who's working with one of those, I would love that. Are you imagining it would go directly from the federal government to those groups, or will be distributed through the local government?
Well, I want to be very clear about this. Absolutely not through the local government. Why? Because the community groups that do get support, and they're very little, they're connected. They're also politically connected. And so the groups that are really doing dynamic work, they try to stay out of politics, they try to stay clean of politics, but then they get no resources to get this work done. So I'm trying to be clear about this. It should go directly from the federal government, the same way Biden and others did when they were giving out COVID relief money, directly to community-based organizations that can get the work done. And to repeat, city governments are political organizations. They feed political machines. They feed that animal that has sucked up billions of dollars in the name of poor people. And poor people are still poor.
Interesting, because this reminded me of, I used to organize in New York City, like 20 years ago, and they have this thing called participatory budgeting in New York City.
Right.
It just this conversation is making me think about if there's some plan to make as NJ Thrives about some chunk of this money that has to be decided on by NGOs or by some community participation process. I think is a really good idea. And actually, I'm remembering that New Jersey's new comptroller used to be the executive director of Fair Share Housing, and they're someone that can look into these kinds of questions. So these are I'm having some serious ideas about how we build this kind of accountability and community control into this money that we still need to win. I see 2 more hands up, and we have 2 more minutes. So I do also want to point out, James is saying that it's not just coastal places that are flooding. Anywhere in New Jersey can flood because of the super intense storm. So this is literally anywhere. So I just want to make sure that's noted. And then let's go to Giovanna and Laura, 1 minute each.
I'll try to be brief. I just wanted to offer 2 things. One is that when we think about development, we really should think about how we can do better and think about how we can reduce carbon emissions. So we really, beyond what Jill was talking about related to how to make buildings emit less, we really have to rethink land use. And so any opportunity to rebuild or restructure, we should think about how to do this in an environmentally friendly way. And then second, to Roy's point, I think it's important, I completely agree. And I think it's important to think about how to build in power when thinking about community participation. And so thinking about things like clawbacks or any sort of entrenched decision-making where communities have not just a voice, but a vote. And in addition, that the previous panel talked about it, but it's so important, this participation has to be resourced. You have to pay people if you expect them to be at the table. And I think that the research on community benefits is really clear that you can't expect this process to be successful unless you give it the appropriate resources that it really needs. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, just responding also to Roy, I think you had really great reflections, and all of this speaks to the idea of institutional design. So how are we going to design our institutions, our processes to be more democratic, to be more accountable, and to be more adaptable and to fast changing environments? So I think one thing that's going on that we should pay attention to is the institutionalization of the idea of social equity and justice as a value, and how exactly that's going on. And coming back around to what Councilwoman said earlier about trying to maybe leave some of the processes to the cost benefit analysis, I think, at least in our fields, this has been kind of continually problematized, because sometimes the cost benefit analysis tilts the whole balance of the funding towards properties with higher value because it's based on property values. So the idea of institutionalizing social justice and social equity makes us think about, like, well, what are different things that we should be considering? Is cost benefit analysis the right tool? Do we need trade-off analysis? Do we need to think about these other social justice and environmental implications of our decisions? So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and this needs to be a reflective, community-driven process, but institutional design is key.
Y'all, thank you so much for your experience, your knowledge, your research, your sort of on the ground expertise. We are at time. I'm going to hand it back over to Neil, but also we get to start talking all together with both of our panels in the third session and really connecting what we want with what's happening in DC and how we bring those things together. Okay, Neil.
It's actually going to go to Alex and then me, but great. Thank you so much,
Alex.
Hi, thank you everyone. And that panel was amazing. You could really see the glimpses of the third panel coming up with that. So I'm Alexandra Chang, and I'm the Interim Associate Director of the Price Institute. I also teach eco art at Rutgers University-Newark and work on the eco art salons. And as we continue the conversation today, and coming also from the last meeting, we hope now to really include some voices of artists from the region. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to read some of the text that accompany the images that the artists Salome Cosmic and Andrea Sarcelli have contributed to our conversation for this online exhibition slideshow that we're going to be showing now for this What South Jersey Needs to Thrive meeting. And so it's really a reminder of our artist communities also, and that they are both artists that are living and working and artists that are working in South New Jersey. And really thinking about them as being deeply involved in this conversation as well, in terms of being part of initiatives going forward. And it was great to hear about Tony's work on Lincoln Park, in fact, and would love to know more about that. And then also of them being part of the community and going forward and thinking about fair housing, right? Looking towards and advocating for clean and affordable energy as well as just futures. So I'm just going to put on this, I'm going to share my screen. Ooh. Somehow it's not sharing correctly. Hold on one second. Yeah, here we go. Okay, I just want to make sure that you can see my screen. Okay, if somebody could just say that they can see it.
All good, very good.
All right, thank you. So what South Jersey needs to thrive, artists from Southern New Jersey, Salome Kosmik and Andrea Sarcelli. This online exhibition features the work of visual artists Salome Kosmik and Andrea Sarcelli from South Jersey, who are both engaged with our environment, sensing what is around us to revealing our global connections and communities in relation to our past, present, and our possible new green futures. Andrea Sarcelli has a strong affinity to the environment, and her abstract, often large-scale work evokes the energy of the ever-changing landscape. Her impulsive and energetic marks beckon resilience in an unpredictable climate, mimicking twisted and broken branches, rushing waters, and wilted grasses with the use of windswept marks that add energy to her narrative of our rapidly changing environment. Sarcelli's love and respect of nature, its growth and decay, and its ability to promote healing is the focus in her works, which range from painting to mixed media, collage, and photography. Sarcelli is a full-time artist living in Manahawkin, New Jersey. The loss of a sense only strengthens the others. I'm not a talker. Being born severely hearing impaired, I'm not much of a listener either. I am mostly an observer. My work is about observing the world around me and then interpreting what I see, what is tangible, what I perceive. While I'm out in nature, I observe the stillness of the woods. I do not hear the birds, but I can feel the soaring strength and solidity of the trees in unity surrounding me. In my home life, the regular chattering of children and dogs barking can be rebarbative with an amplified hearing aid. But the physical presence of my children, the quietness of love generated by them, inspires my work to no end. The bits and pieces of a life given, the everyday challenges that we all face daily, positive or negative, balanced or unbalanced, ultimately give rise to my work. My work is about how I interpret what is going on around me, whether I see it, feel it, or hear it. The inspiration for my work runs deep into what I wish for nature, that we respect and preserve it, the wild and untouched, that we always be in awe of it. Salome Kosmik. Salome Kosmik is a Colombian artist, educator, and curator currently residing in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She has a degree in visual arts from the University of Strasbourg in France. In 2012, while in France, she obtained her National Diploma of Plastic Arts with a concentration in sound arts from the School of the Arts of the Rhine in Mulhouse, France. Upon finishing her studies, she moved to Puerto Rico, where she participated in several collective and individual exhibitions. In 2017, she moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where she has continued to develop her artistic, curatorial, and educational career. She is currently a curator of dissident bodies and works as an educator in different educational projects in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. For Salome, the arts form a positive vehicle, which can bring beneficial changes to society, as well as the potential to transform lives. Art as a healer, something she promotes in her artistic pursuits. Since 2012, her performance art has been inspired by colonialism, immigration, women's inequality, and dissident bodies. Through her pictorial work, the artist seeks to remember the memories of our ancestors. She has exhibited in Europe, Latin America, India, United States, and the Caribbean. As an artist, I am interested in the political, social, and healing power of the arts. I believe that one of the best weapons for the transformation of society is through the arts, which is why I consider myself an artist and a multidisciplinary artist. Through the use of different mediums, painting, drawing, sound, and performance, I allow myself to express my diverse political, historical, anthropological, and spiritual interests. One of the objectives of my work is to remember our memories, where we came from, and who our ancestors were. Because if we do not remember our history, we will be unable to affect change, and we will continue to repeat the same mistakes. I see my performance actions as part of my activism and as a symbol of protest. As an artist, I am interested in the inequality of women, dissident bodies, immigration, and colonialism. Through my performances, I use my body as a vehicle of protest, allowing the public to interact with my body so that they may also live the experience and be part of the work itself. This performance was a tribute to the Sioux community. It was a particularly windy Saturday afternoon when the journey from the Philadelphia bank of the Delaware River to Camden, New Jersey began. In 3 months, Colombian artists Adrian Hueso and Salome Cosmic planned a symbolic trek across the Ben Franklin Bridge they called Cuerpos al Vacío. The hour-and-a-half performance on April 27th highlighted the experiences of immigrants crossing the US southern border. Their inspiration came from the children at the center of the chaos. The performance was a window into Puerto Rico's history of disenfranchisement at the hands of the US, as different moments in the history between the US and Puerto Rico were displayed on the screen to the tune of the Puerto Rican national anthem. Cosmic brought out a Puerto Rican flag and laid it next to a pile of sand and stack of papers. 1 by 1, or sometimes 2 by 2, Cosmic displayed the audience the different historical moments written on each piece of paper, from the transfer of Puerto Rico to the US following the Spain-American War to the recent protests that ousted then Governor Ricardo Rossello before burying them beneath handfuls of sand atop the Puerto Rican flag. The performance ended when Cosmic pulled the flag from beneath the pile of sand and papers and laid it on top of the scattered fragments of history representing a new beginning for the island in the name of the performance, Renacer, Rebirth. Crouched on a blue tarp and throwing sand over her body and the Puerto Rican flag, the Colombian artist said the performance offered a critique of how these events are frequently forgotten. Using guttural sounds and video imagery, the performance artist invoked the Andean Earth Mother Pachamama to emphasize the connections between man and nature in a ritual to bring awareness and pay homage to Humboldt's idea of a systemic world. I had the receipts of my consumption, which I kept for 7 months. With pins that were at my side, I began to put on my body my consumption, saying out loud, buying. I put my consumption on my body. After having a part of consumption on me, I wrap myself in a transparent plastic with the help of the present public. We are part of the consumption, and he returns us objects for sale. With the performance No Mas, I seek to make an active protest and pay posthumous tribute to the immigrants who have died in the desert of the United States trying to achieve the desired American dream. Dressed in black and with my face covered, I acted in the Plaza de Bolivar in Bogota, Colombia. I started the action in front of the Congress. In my right hand, I had a bucket with blood, and the Colombian flag was inside. In my left hand, I had water and carnations. I washed the flag with blood. I spread it on the floor, and I threw the water in the carnations. This action speaks of the victims of war in Colombia, of the blood that is spilled daily in the Colombian territory, and of how the Colombian people want peace and the healing of open veins that the country has. I want to thank the artists for contributing their text and images. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. I want to also thank Salome and Andrea for sharing their work. And I want to thank the housing panel, which illustrated to all of us how housing fits extremely well, actually, with environmental justice issues, equity issues, and also climate change. So, just really finding new ways to bring all this together through both the art and then topics which we thought were, not directly related, but we see are. On to the third panel. This is when we all come together. If we can maybe bring everyone back on to the stage here. The third panel on infrastructure. And for that panel, we are happy to have as co-moderators Amanda, who you all know from the housing panel. She's back. And she's also brought Tim Sahay, who is Senior Policy Manager at the Green New Deal Network. And I'm going to turn it over to them right away so we can get into a good conversation regarding how energy and housing as themes and problems might fit into infrastructure issues, especially as related to Biden's most recent proposal. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Neil. And thank you so much to Alex for bringing that work. I actually live in Manahawkin with one of those artists who I've not met, and I haven't seen that work before. So that was really exciting. I would, no pressure, but I would invite folks if they're able and really interested in participating to come off camera or to come on camera, I'm sorry. So, you know, in case we need to get things going and we need to voluntold somebody I know who's available. Okay, so we're really lucky to have Tim with us. And I think Tim's been having a little bit of audio issues. Tim, can you hear me okay? Want to come off mute? We can mess with the tech for a second if you want. Oh, did we lose Tim again? Tim, are you there? Let me just double check. Hey, Tim, can you hear me? Can other people hear me? Yeah, okay, great. So like I said, Tim is actually in India, so we're working on it. Oh, Tim, are you there? He just sent me a message on Slack that he got kicked out right as I started. It's totally fine. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to see if Tim can come back in. And so I'll start out before we introduce the section. I actually want to then just kick it back to Councilwoman Boucher, who had a thought, but we were running out of time in the last section. So let's go back there and then kind of see what happens if we're going to have Tim or if I'm going to be a poor stand-in for Tim. Okay, Councilwoman.
Thank you. I appreciate this additional time. My thought about some of the things that we feel about local government versus state government versus federal government. As a person who is in government on a local level, I think that it's really hard for us to go through the regulations of state and then federal government. A lot of the monies that come in, especially to towns like Camden, there are a lot of regulations. And those regulations make it very difficult to move things forward. So for instance, like the money that has come down from the Biden administration, we received it in May, and we still don't have all the regulations from the federal government on how we can spend it or how it has to be classified. And in regards to the transparency piece, they put a lot of stipulations on what we can actually do most of the time. So a lot of the times you will have local government that wants to do some of the things that the advocates say, but because of the regulations attached to that federal dollar, it is very difficult. And but I also wanted to say in regards to giving monies directly from the federal government directly to agencies, I love that idea. However, the federal government makes it very difficult to do that because they basically make you spend the money before you can get reimbursed. And so that is a preventive measure, and so does the state. And so if you're applying for $1 million grant and you have to spend so much money before you get any money back, I think that is really difficult for, I would say, is advocate organizations, for grassroots organizations. And then this idea of equitable amounts of money going to leaders of color. I love that Roy brought that up as an issue and as a point, but that is really difficult. And I think that it has been very difficult even from government is because there are so many regulations on who you can give the money to. And as we know, sometimes people of color cannot put all of the factors or government factors that they need to put together to be able to apply for that funding. So things like 990s that are required to receive monies over 25K or 50K, they require you to do a 990 and that will cost you thousands of dollars. So if you are a small nonprofit or organization, you won't be able to do that. And you could never build up the capacity that you need to meet the checklist of requirements from federal money or state money or even sometimes foundation money. So that is something in my capacity that I've been advocating against and really trying to get resources for and the foundation side. But I think that if we can address those things with federal governments and state governments of how do you give money to these organizations that may not have everything that you list in regards to paperwork just because of the lack of funding so that we can make the funding allocation, I would say, more equitable. So that is just something that I wanted to throw out there for all, because regardless of whether people like their local politicians, you have to figure out a way to work with them because at some point they are going to be making decisions. And I think because of the rub between how difficult it could be to work together, people try not to come to the table. And I just want to reiterate for people, that is a mistake because decisions will be made with or without you. And you want to be at the table partnering with your local elected officials making sure that they always hear your opinions, even if you disagree, because there will be influence that you will have just being at the table consistently. So I just would like to leave that out there for people who have strong feelings against working with local government.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Quick question, Marcus, is that a direct response? Because Tim is back. Yeah, go ahead. Then we'll do the me and Tim thing. Go ahead, Marcus. Thank you.
Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to make a quick point. Again, I'm really appreciative of being involved with this, and I just wanted to make a quick point that the one good and the bad about a panel is it's just a snapshot, and people can hear what you have to say, but we all have to do our homework. We can hear whatever we hear, but we have to do our homework to make sure what's being said adds up to what the practice is. And I want to go to a point that Roy made about how much money has gone into Camden over a certain time. And that's a reality. The reality is many of our major cities, our Newarks, our Camdens, some towns in Salem County, like money comes into certain places and then it doesn't get to the ground. That's the whole point of this whole webinar, is to speak about how that continuously happens. So I just want to make that point. Like, the reality is the community does try to work, but because of things like bosses, because of things like party line voting, because of things like nepotism, all these different things are happening and the funds aren't getting to the city. So I have been in a lot of different meetings, and I hear one thing at meetings and then I see different things on panels. And what has to happen is we need everybody who's on this panel to also attend these meetings so that nothing has to be hearsay. We can hear firsthand, because everything that happens before it gets instituted, it has to be voted on, correct? So that means there are people who we vote for who are voting on the things that going against the community. And a lot of these things aren't that hard. Many of the fights that we're in, there are usually over 200 environmental groups that are fighting against something, and they always pass. And that's a problem. So it's like, we can talk all day, but until we all start putting the pressure on our first line of defense are our elected officials, because they have the ability to allocate money where it's supposed to go. And then they have the ability to say no to certain permits. So it's not like we don't understand that we have to work together, but we also have to understand that one of these parties has more power than the other. And it's important for the party with the power to exercise the power on behalf of the people instead of on behalf of the people with the money, because like Roy's statistics showed you, how in the world can over $300 million go to a city and that city is still poor? The numbers don't lie. So we can say whatever we want, but the numbers don't lie. So thank you so much for that second, Amanda. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, just to speak from my own experience, sort of about, I think what we're starting to drill down into a little bit now, which is the imbalance of power between everyday people like ourselves and some politically connected corporations and contractors. So we focused a bunch on Superstorm Sandy recovery, and you've heard folks talk about how poorly it's going, or the fact that they're being asked for grant money back when they didn't do anything wrong. So towns in New Jersey and people in New Jersey who have suffered through Superstorm Sandy are being asked to repay grant money, but yet the company, HGI, that we hired to run the REM program, which was the state's premier program for homeowner recovery, and donated at that time, Governor Christie was the governor, to the Republican Governors Association, totally screwed up the program. They got fired. Another company was hired, but they walked away with like between 40 and 60 million, and they're not being asked to repay any of that. So like that kind of stuff just makes you want to set things on fire. And even to this question of reimbursements, like, so I'm the director of the New Jersey Resource Project and the New Jersey Organizing Project, but I'm also someone living on the front lines of the climate crisis. And I just was able to get this grant from my town to lift my house to get above like a very risky level. It's the house that was my grandmother's, been in my family since 1929. But that grant was a reimbursement. So if I didn't have a way to come up with $120,000, I would have lost the opportunity to make my home safer. And I borrowed it from my parents. Not everybody has parents to borrow from. Not everybody has parents with $120,000 to borrow from. How is that our grant mitigation program? Like that is the FEMA grant mitigation program. That's crazy. So like that reimbursement thing is happening on a government level and an individual level. And this is some of the stuff that we've got to think about shifting to being more just. Okay, so we have Tim with us. He's sort of co-moderating, but also I just wanted to have him come share. Tim is the National Policy Manager for the National Green New Deal Network. And he's like one of my favorite policy people I've met in recent years. He's probably one of a handful of people in the country right now who knows the most about what is happening in Congress around these potential historic investments. And so I wanted to have him come sort of share with us what's happening and how we can connect our community needs to that. But then also, it's like 1 a.m. in India where he is. So thank you for joining us. I just wanted to give him a brief review of some of the big themes that have come up with us today. So Tim, we had a panel that was about energy, and then we had a panel that was about housing. So on the question of energy, our folks shared that they really are supportive of solar energy and wind energy, but really drilling down on this idea of jobs and access to jobs out of those industries for folks that have been traditionally excluded from those industries. And of course, supporting the idea that these should be union jobs, but knowing that it can be very hard to get into some of these trade unions. And like, so what do we do about that contradiction? We talked about the US's outsized carbon footprint. We talked about the need to kind of do better weatherization and greening buildings so we're not using as much energy as we need to. And, you know, it came up in both panels, actually, this question about roads and infrastructure. Both, you know, someone who's on an island down south and someone who's on an island a little further north both said, like, our roads flood. We're going to be trapping people. If there's an emergency, people won't be able to get out. And then we also talked about control, like how our local and state and even federal elected officials can be distant from community needs. New Jersey has some very powerful party bosses, how sometimes even money and investments that come in that should be helping regular folks just kind of get turned into like feeding the machine, and what we do about that to really bring the resources down to local control. And we talked, of course, about, and you've heard us talk about this before, Tim, how vulnerable New Jersey is to sea level rise and flooding, and what we do and how much affordable housing stock is at risk. Folks, I probably missed some big themes. Oh, and how we can work together, like how we can bring resources from like academics to community level, how we often need help, resources, research, things that are actually palatable to our communities. And some of the challenges in terms of how partisan some of these questions have gotten when they're really not political issues. They're like our home issues, they're our community issues, but how that can sometimes make it hard to get things done. The sort of politics of it, either the party boss issue or the like partisan issue. Please throw in chat if I miss anything, but I want to now just introduce Tim and ask him to take like 5 minutes or so and just let us know what's happening in Congress. And if you want to tell us a little bit about who you are too, Tim. Tim. Did we lose Tim again? Tim, are you there? That's so funny. Oh, he is. Hi, Tim. Okay, we can't hear you. I see you're off mute, but we don't hear anything yet. Oh, he's back. Can anyone else hear Tim? No.
They're working on trying to get him back on audio.
Oh, good, good, awesome. We have actual tech support on this event, Tim, which never happens on just plain NJOP events. I mean, we have like our members and staff, but like. We just want to give it a second and see if we can make it work. If not, I will give.
Sorry, Amanda, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, I'm really sorry about this, but I am, I just decided to go to India for a 2-week break while Congress is on, and started the business. Okay, so lot for the introduction and for the recap of the 2 panels that we had on energy. And yeah, I should probably just begin with I totally understand the skepticism and the difficulty in getting federal monies out to local and state governments. I think that has been a major, major challenge, right from the Obama stimulus in 2009 to the CARES Act last year, and the Corona relief money coming out to states and localities has been very difficult. And as some people mentioned, particularly in states with Republicans, legislatures, or so we can trying to make sure that there are workarounds put moving along discussion federal agencies so they can directly give monies to city governments and directly allow NGOs to apply for that money.
You are breaking up just a little bit, but it's like not terrible. So just, I think, talk a little slower. Let's see if that works. You're definitely.
Okay. I will try and talk a little slower. I hope that's okay. So just on the question of what is happening in Congress right now, say the one is a hell of a lot of money for if the candidate that the Democrats are currently considering goes through the House. It's been voted through the Senate, so it received all 50 votes, including from the holdouts like Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema from Arizona. But at this point, it has passed the Senate, so it's very likely to pass the House as well. But that's what we're working on for the next 2 months. But the first question is, what is the total amount of new spending? And a good sort of comparison is what was the total amount of spending in the Obama stimulus after the last crash? And that, as folks would remember, was about $800 billion. This total amount of new spending in the reconciliation budget is about $3.5 trillion and about $500 billion in the bipartisan deal. So when you add them up, that's about $4,000 billion. Okay, so that's about 5 times more money than the Obama stimulus. So this is why I said this is a hell of a lot of money. It's probably the largest investment package that the US government has done ever. So that's $4,000 billion of new money, which is why we have been calling it, as part of the Green New Deal network, we've been extensively, fighting to get something much bigger. We wanted a $6 trillion package that Senator Sanders and Senator Schumer had put forward in the Senate, but we are going to call the $4 trillion package a down payment on the decade of the Green New Deal. So there are 2 things moving, and when you add them up, they add up to $4,000 billion of new spending. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, what is this money going towards? And if we've been paying attention, we've seen President Biden came out with his American Jobs Plan, and he came out with the American Families Plan. And so that's basically, when you add up those 2 plans, they add up to about $4 trillion. And that money is going towards families. So it establishes a universal pre-K for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, and a new childcare benefit for working families. So that's about $300 per month per child for working families. It makes community college tuition free for 2 years. It's the largest ever tax cut for families with the CTC, with the child tax credit. And it increases Pell Grants and makes investments in historically Black colleges and creates the first ever paid family leave of 12 weeks and medical leave benefits. So that's about $1 trillion of the money of the $4 trillion is devoted to American families. As far as investment in infrastructure and jobs go, this is going to be, again, a historic level of investment in public housing, in affordable housing, in green and sustainable housing. So all of those, a lot of those grants for building retrofits, and a lot of those grants for weatherizing public housing, and for federally assisted housing. So that's Maxine Waters' bill in the House is being funded for about $300-400 billion. It establishes the first ever civilian climate corps, which is what the Sunrise Movement has been fighting for. So that's going to employ anywhere between 100,000 to 200,000 people above the age of 18 to 45 who are looking to work in resiliency or looking to work in, local weatherization of public schools and public buildings where they are. It's going to invest in workforce development and jobs training programs to connect workers to jobs. So that vision of the American Jobs Plan is being funded, by an enormous amount. It's going to be the largest one-time investment in Native American infrastructure projects. So there are going to be projects, everything from a native CCC to housing to energy credits. So that's the infrastructure element of the jobs plan, and specifically the climate element of the jobs plan is going to create a new utility program. This is the CES, if you've been looking at the Clean Energy Standard, which essentially gives utilities money if they provide renewable electricity and penalizes firms, utilities, if they're providing dirty energy. So it's basically an incentive program for utilities to clean up their act. And then, a lot of this money is going to be paid for by polluter fees. If, with methane fees, it's going to be paid for, obviously, by increasing taxes on corporations and increasing taxes on people who make more than $400,000. So the entire infrastructure package of $4,000 billion is being funded by progressive taxation, which, is a huge win. This is why Bernie Sanders, who's been on the budget committee, has been fighting, his whole life, basically. And that's passed through Senate. So like I said, it's very likely to also pass the House now. Again, going back to the climate investments of it, there's going to be a lot of investment into EV charging and EV rebates for electric vehicles. We in the Green New Deal Network are saying that the money for EVs is too little and the money for public transit is too little. So we are still fighting for much more money for electric buses, electric trains, more money for Amtrak, and money for high-speed rail, again, to connect the Northeast Corridor. So there are definitely gaps in climate that we are hoping that the House committees are going to fill. And as far as electrifying New Jersey really needs money in the ports. It needs money, particularly all the diesel trucks and that service all of the ports in New Jersey. We want every single one of those to be electrified. So we are looking to get as many programs funded for electrification of ports in the jobs plan. And then the last element of the infrastructure budget is obviously the healthcare budget, the healthcare programs. And these are, adding dental, vision, and hearing benefit to the Medicare program. It's lowering the age of Medicare from 65 to 60. And the big one is investing in home and community-based services to help seniors. So this is what SEIU has been fighting for. And as far as we know, that program for home care of seniors has been funded, something like $200 to $300 billion. So it's an enormous new program that would allow people to stay at home and receive care from their loved ones, from volunteers that would pay something like $18 to $25 an hour. And lastly, it would also be reducing the prescription drug prices for patients. So that's a major reform that is going to save taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars. So that's essentially, the sum total of the president's family's plans and the American Jobs Plan. The last thing I would say is that these two Senate bills, when you add them up, yes, they are 5 times the size of the Obama stimulus. Yes, it's a hell of a lot of money, but there are major gaps that we are fighting to fill in the House. Amongst those gaps are, one of those that I mentioned was not enough money for public transit at all, not enough money for union-built electric vehicles, not enough money for EV charging infrastructure, because people are not going to switch to electric cars unless you expand the charging stations. So we are looking for each of those transit gaps to be filled in by the House Transportation Committee. And partly what we're also looking to fill is we need a whole lot more money for electrification of all the school buses. The current deal includes just about $2.5 billion for electric school buses, and that's, you know, it's going to be only about 4% of what's needed. We still have 96% of school buses, you know, spewing diesel fumes where, you know, are exposed to. So we are looking for a lot more money to fully fund electrification of school buses and electrification of so we are not happy with that component of it. We're also not happy with the fossil fuel subsidy will remain. So the 20 largest fossil fuel companies, you know, they get about $15 fossil fuel subsidies from the federal government each year, and we want to end those. So we are going to make sure that there are provisions that the House committees put in to end those fossil fuel subsidies. And lastly, we are really, really upset with the Senate for not replacing 100% of lead pipes. New Jersey has a lot of lead pipes. It's a very old water distribution system, just like most of the Northeast. And the current Senate plan leaves 3 out of 4 lead pipes still in the ground. This was, you know, President Biden's big promise was to replace all 100% of lead pipes, and it was only going to cost about $45 billion in this enormous $4,000 billion budget. And it's only received a quarter of what's needed. So 3 out of 4 lead pipes are going to remain in the ground, which we think is an absolute travesty. And we've gotten support from, you know, over 100 congressmen in the House who are, you know, almost certainly going to increase the budget so that every single lead pipe can be replaced. And we're also unhappy with the amount of money given to retrofit, upgrade, electrify all public schools. The money given in the Senate budget is too little. The Senate budget in general is, you know, because of the over-representation of rural states, that simply doesn't take into account the needs of cities. So we want to make sure that there's enough money for upgrading and electrifying all public schools in the country, which is going to require, you know, all of us to fight in the next month or two as the House starts to modify the Senate bills. And so, yeah, that's my sort of take on this absolutely historic investment package that is being considered in the House and Senate. And you know, if we all push, it should become law sometime in the month of October, or at latest in early November.
So, like, that is amazing. And I'm really grateful again, Tim, that you're up at 1 in.the morning, that you really know what's happening, and that you like come to share with our academic and our community, you know, panelists here what's going on. While we all think, I mean, I want to give, you know, a couple minutes to ask a question directly to Tim. Like, if there's some piece of something that you're working on and you want to know, like, hey, is there going to be funding for that? Let's ask Tim. But I don't see Scott on camera. I don't know if that means you can't talk, but Scott, you've been adding some really helpful things. Oh, there you are. Scott, do you mind sharing the sort of thing that you said in the chat, particularly about New Jersey's kind of political relevance in this debate? And you didn't mention Scott Gottheimer, which I might follow up on, but go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, well, so New Jersey has 3 important touchstones here, and maybe a 4th, as you point out. Congressman Pallone chairs the Energy and Commerce Committee of the House. It's the largest committee. A lot of what was just mentioned and more is something under his committee's jurisdiction, not appropriations, but at least how the final authorization gets framed. Senator Menendez is principal author of the Livable Communities Act that would restore the Obama-Biden Partnership for Sustainable Communities, both the grant-making program and perhaps this time around implementation funding, and would mandate an interagency partnership between at least HUD and DOT to get that one right. And despite what's wrong with community development block grants, there was another block grant during ERA for environment and energy conservation made to cities on a one-time basis. An appropriation, maybe the smallest one in the infrastructure bill, $550 million, would restore that block grant for cities. And this one would come under the EJ screen in the president's executive order. So that could be a source of the funding that for the councilman's idea of an innovation fund to work around some of these problems. And I would encourage people to get familiar with this, since the New Jersey mayors in particular were very appreciative by the White House for having rolled up their sleeves to help make that one happen. So I think the other touchstone that hasn't been mentioned is these sort of lesser known but very large metropolitan planning organizations do have direct funding authority over a lot of the money that's going to come out of this bill. There's 3 of them. And if they don't adequately represent your interests, well, there are provisions in the law to do something about that. I helped write it, so I would be happy to help frame such an effort. But you know, if you don't take charge, it'll take charge of you. I think that's maybe the theme of the day here for the many proposals that are being made. So thanks for that call out, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So one thing we do at NJOP, and if folks have a specific question they want to ask about something their community really needs, do the hand up thing so I know who to call on. But one thing we do at NJOP is we really just try to say, you know, parties like don't matter. We really try to like not get into like, you know, we're with the Democrats or we're with the Republicans, because when you really get to it, it's like we're with the people or we're with the politically connected contractors and corporations at the end of the day. And the rest of it is kind of like helps, it sort of clouds that and divides people who otherwise could be working together. Anyway, so on that note, actually New Jersey has a Democratic Congressman, Scott Gottheimer, who's right now potentially trying to hold up some of this investment. And that's why Chief Mann and folks were outside his office today. So, you know, we really say party doesn't matter. It's like, are you with us? Are you not with us? Tim's asked too that I can share this budget bills FAQ in the chat. And this is a really great document to walk us through what's happening. It looks like nobody has a hand up. So let me just ask Tim to follow up on some of our issues that we mentioned. And then at about 4:25, I'm going to hand it back over to Neil. So Tim, either in the bipartisan infrastructure bill or the budget reconciliation bill, what kind of investments are we seeing in cleanup in Superfund sites and environmental justice communities, job training, and a sort of a road into a career in green energy, and then money for adaptation and mitigation for climate impacts? Like, how is all of that looking?
Sorry, was that a question for me for jobs, green energy jobs, and climate adaptation?
It was a question for you. Yep. So I was
okay. Yes, I can. Okay. Yeah. So for green jobs, I think essentially sort of community colleges up and down New Jersey and Eastern Seaboard are training people for things like offshore wind, for installing solar panels. Those are going to be sort of the ocean in New Jersey and a whole bunch of new projects that have been approved just in the last year. So if you think about what's going to happen in the ports, is going to be a frenzy of new activity, because each of these offshore wind projects requires, cables to be servicing to be done on these turbines, and it requires these turbines to be manufactured because they're incredibly bulky and they cannot be shipped from overseas. They really have to be made, in the GE facility in Boston or somewhere in New Jersey. So there's going to be a lot of new manufacturing jobs, service jobs starting in the offshore wind sector. It's programs with each community college that many NGOs in New Jersey and Massachusetts have been a part of, basically applying of new solar and wind jobs. The second element that you mentioned of there are, it's been hard, particularly women and people to get jobs that unions have traditionally protected, and that is definitely one of the things that we are trying to work with the federal agencies to do preferential hiring of women and communities of color. So that is one of the kind of the guardrails that we're trying to put into legislation is preferential hiring. We've gotten that in a bunch of programs in the Senate bills, and we are hoping that the House will continue to add on those guardrails, just to make sure that we do get preferential local hiring every time these jobs are created. And I think the second question about climate resiliency and adaptation, again, this is an absolutely historic amount of new money coming for coastal resiliency programs. We've seen coastal resiliency programs in the last summer budget to be, something like $2 or $3 billion nationwide. And if you know anything about resiliency, it's really, a single home can take up to $200,000-$300,000 to be lifted up. So coastal resiliency programs need to be in the billions of dollars. And I'm happy to say that we managed to get about $47 billion worth of coastal resiliency funding in this budget. And this grant programs, the Sea Grant program, and other programs administered by the coastal zone management agencies will be getting a large chunk of change from federal funding. And I'm sure there's going to be some cost sharing element as well for, depending upon the fiscal status of a municipality. But coastal resiliency is going to be a really, really big part of this infrastructure project. And, we are going to have to work out in the next month. The Green New Deal Network will be, working with academics and community groups in New Jersey to figure out exactly which agencies will be getting money and communities guys to obtain. But this is definitely an enormous amount of money for coastal resiliency. And there's also about $15 or $16 billion for upgrading ports. And that's because Senator Mark Warner from Virginia and Virginia Beach, has a lot of erosion and a lot of ports that need federal funding. So he's managed to get $16 billion for all federal ports. So again, we need to work out exactly how much the ports in New Jersey are going to get, but there's set aside money for resiliency of ports and port communities. Again, like I said, this is, it's one of the things with this budget. It is that it is simultaneously a historic budget and it is too small. We all know it's to take a lot more. We were fighting for $10 trillion over 10 years. We got $4 trillion over 10 years. So it's a down payment. We are going to have to, see that this money is used well, see that communities can see the money and fight harder for the next round of federal funding, whether it happens in 2022 or 2024, we don't know. But that's our goal, that we need to, take the wins that we can get, make sure that it gets out to people. And difference, and then fight for more, whether it's coastal resiliency or whether it's more green jobs.
Thank you, Tim. And I also know, because I was looking into this on this question of like roads and upgrading roads around climate resilience, I believe there is some funding for that in these packages too, which is really exciting. Also, I took the advice of clicking on that live transcript, and reading along is helping in terms of the connectivity issues. So Tim, if you don't mind hanging on for another 5 or 10 minutes till we hit the end, I'm going to pass it back to Neil and Jack to close us out. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to have been in conversation with everyone today. Neil and Jack.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda. And Tim, I would like to ask you to stay, because I think we're going to wrap up with one final question to you in just 1 minute, okay? I just want to thank everyone again for taking time out of their day. It was a long day, but I think that we really hung in there and had a great conversation. I also want to mention that we're going to be following up with everybody. Part of the goal is not just a one-time event, it's to try to keep this collaboration moving. So we've had our scribes, Colleen O'Neill and Omanjana Goswami, taking notes throughout this session. We're going to follow up with a report to you all on the big takeaways. We're also hopefully going to follow up with a survey to each of you a very, very short survey to figure out what we did right and what we can improve on, and also what we can do for the upcoming event. And that'll come out as well in the next couple of weeks. And then finally, we're going to follow up with another event in late October, where we bring in politicians into this conversation. And in thinking about those next steps, Tim, I'm wondering if you could just maybe wrap this all up by answering a question, which is, in your opinion, what can local communities and academics as collaborators do specifically to ensure that this legislation benefits frontline communities here in New Jersey? What should we do as a group to try to keep the pressure on? If you have any specifics, that would be great.
Thanks a lot for that, Neil. I don't think I should be closing it out because I missed the last two sessions. So I think Amanda should do that at the end. But specifically for what academics can do, I think, the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Committee that's set up, and I'm sure some of you were part of it. But the WEJAC, committee put in a whole bunch of recommendations. You can go to the White House Environmental Justice Committee report and find literally 50 things that EJ academics and scholars have proposed that the White House do. And it's quite clear that the White House isn't doing all of them. Congress isn't doing all of them. So that would be my go-to place to advise, all of you to just go and make sure that the Department of Energy is hearing from you, make sure that the White House is hearing from you, make sure your state congressmen are hearing from you, because what we need right now is to make sure that there are guardrails and standards put into place into legislation now in the next month or two, which is what each of the House committees is going to be doing. Because if we have those EJ standards and put into place now, that's going to guide every single dollar of federal investment for the next 10 years. So this literally becomes the most important 2-month window, where we can get standards put into place that make sure that 40% of the money goes towards frontline communities, that make sure, how do we exactly decide what a frontline community is? Needs data and mapping, and it needs something like what California has successfully done, implement the Justice 40 requirement of this fund. Otherwise, we're going to essentially, get the money all sorts of places. Wanted to go towards historically deindustrialized communities, towards communities of color. We need to make sure we have the mapping tools in place so that either the White House or Congress or all the ombudsmen that are put in each agencies can monitor these funds and make sent to the appropriate places. So I would just go to the White House Advisory Council report, what area that you're working in, and make sure that you try and get those standards into legislation in the next month or two. And I should leave that to Amanda.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. And Amanda, before you close out, Jack, do you want to add something from the Price Institute?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I've been listening intently and taking notes, and I'm just so appreciative of everybody's time, especially on a Saturday afternoon. And what day is this?
Thursday, Chuck.
I don't even know what it is. But especially on a Thursday afternoon, right? But it's been an amazing discussion. People have been so generous in their thinking and time and advice and wisdom from their decades of work and experience. So thank you. We are taking very close notes. We would love to get your feedback, both in terms of the forms, but also just anything else you have to say to us. And we will try to make that last session and also beyond that, based on so much of what Tim has said and what you all know about already in terms of how we can follow up. And we'll just try to support that process as best we can. So thank you. It's really been amazing. Thank you.
So that third session will be on October 29th. That's the tentative date. You will all know about it, and that's when we put the pressure on the politicians. Amanda, do you want to say anything?
I would, and I would also love to suggest we not do October 29th. That's the Superstorm Sandy anniversary, and we are going to be incredibly busy with very specific things that day. So maybe like the day after, or
We'll figure it out. We'll be in touch for sure about that. We'll figure it out.
So I really appreciate Neil and Jack's like collaboration and trust with all of us in putting this together. I've not actually done something like this before, and it's been a really positive experience. In my organizing tradition, we say that the work has to move at the speed of relationships. And I've learned from my colleagues, Maria and Kim Gaddy, that in the environmental justice community, people say that the work has to move at the speed of trust. And it's really exciting to really take the time to listen and build relationships and learn about each other. And I'm grateful. And I'm going to kick it over to James to say our last words and close us out.
Sure, it's been an honor and a pleasure to hear from such an esteemed and amazing group of individuals that clearly have a passion and a wealth of knowledge about this issue, and understanding that justice is a holistic practice. It doesn't just belong to criminal justice reform or environmental justice or housing justice, but to all. You know, for me as a housing advocate, if I build the most beautiful, affordable, wonderful home, but I'm building in an area that's going to flood, what have I done for you? If you provide an amazing environment for people to live and breathe and to drink clean water, but I build a house that will fall apart, what have I done for you? So all of these things, have to happen in tandem. They have to be married together. So I'm happy that, this group of individuals came together to talk about these issues together and not separately as siloed topics, but as ones that are just phenomenally coupled together at the hip. So hopefully we can continue to work and bring the type of holistic justice that belongs to our communities, that's not based on race or economics or anything, but just belongs to the individuals that deserve it. So thank you all for being here. It's an honor and a pleasure to be in the space. And I look forward to hopefully working with you all in the future.
Well, on that note, we will say more to come as we all continue to collaborate and seal the deal. Okay, so hang in there. Thank you so much. And you'll hear from us. We'll be in touch. Okay, and please reach out to us if you want to need anything or want to continue talking. Thanks, everyone.